felt like I was yelling at y'all there for a second. No. All right. Nope, still too loud. All right. I really don't like hearing myself. There. I haven't even heard from Spawn yet this morning. We have about 30-ish minutes before the hearing starts. No, I was just bored. I figured I'd go ahead and hop on. I can end it. I'm still here. Y'all enjoy some music while we wait on people to join in. I was buffering. You know, the internet's been really weird today. Or YouTube's been weird today. I've noticed several people are just sitting and buffering today. Or glitching out. Maybe YouTube's doing an update. I'm not sure. Hey everyone, bear with me. I have a tiny human losing his mind, so I'll be right back. Okay, guys. So I got a question. Do y'all think Diddy will get bail today? If you think he will, put a 1 in the chat. If you think he won't, put a 2 in the chat. Y'all like my thumbnail? I threw that together really quick this morning with all the baby oil. It seemed fitting. Poopy. Right? It says there are 8 watching, but I'm only seeing Tim, Gail, and Coop talking. And you're right, Tim, he is still considered a flight risk, especially with everything he was doing while he was in the shoe. You think he will spill the beans on anyone else in the trafficking ring? Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Oprah's definitely in it. I honestly believe she's one of the elders, along with the Clintons. And Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah. Oprah's evil. I find it interesting that she happens to have a house on the same island as Diddy. I find it interesting that she happened to have a house in Maui. There's so many coincidences that surround her. And I think we will see a lot more go down. Yeah, the parakeet says she has to be the star of the show this morning. Especially since the sunshine's starting to come out. And if I'm not mistaken, she was seen at quite a few Diddy parties. Exactly, Tim. Hollywood is full of PDF files. Full of them. If you can't find the water jug, just get a glass. only fill the water up to right above the root. Otherwise, it'll make the stalk rot. And Coop, he's the conure, right? There's a lot more that people say are conspiracies, but as each arrest happens, it's no longer a conspiracy. They brainwash people by saying, oh, they're just crazy conspiracy theorists. But that's not the case, obviously. Oh yeah, the Quaker. They're so loud. The Quakers are always so loud. Thank you, Pumpkin. I know. So dang, sis, you could at least stir it up. So Sissy made me oatmeal and didn't stir it after it came out of the microwave. There you go. Don't get it on Daddy's computer. My conure was very mouthy, and my conure hated my brother. That's my brother's fault. Him and my brother would argue like they were siblings. It was hilarious. Gail, I get that they're adults, it's their business, but they chose to be actors and musicians, and they chose to put themselves out in the public eye, and then to do the things they're doing to children and women. Yeah, no, it's not their business. Not at all. Back during the COVID stuff in 2020, I was a large part of the Save the Children movement. I attended quite a few protests and rallies in my hometown. So who knows? Who knows? There's the whole quote unquote conspiracy of the adrenochrome. So what do they suck their bloods out like freaking vampires? It's just, as Hollyweird would say, they're just conspiracies. Oh, don't get me started on Scientology. Don't get me started on that. So much has come out about that. I mean, oh, I get it, Gail. Me too. And that's why it is so close to my heart. And I'm a mom. it triggers the mama bear in me, this stuff. After the things I've heard about Disney, my kids, they aren't allowed to watch Disney. Nope. They're not allowed to listen to Taylor Swift. There's several other stuff I don't allow them to do because of the weird stuff that goes on behind the scenes with those things. We have to be so vigilant now, when it wasn't like that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We have to live with our heads on a swivel as parents, because these PDFs are just roaming the streets. Oh, and let's not forget all the illegal criminals on our streets. Hey, King Bob. Thank you for coming in. Wow, I had a blonde moment. I've been sitting here talking the whole time, muted. Mom brain is horrible. Baby bird, come on. Oh, he's sassy. He don't want out, which is weird. Sorry, I was sitting here having a conversation and didn't realize I was muted. So, I've been talking to y'all this whole time. Mom brain is bad. It has 5 minutes until the hearing. Listen, when you're over here, you got little man beside you. You got your daughter trying to get the birds out of their house. You just forget you're muted. And you're right, Gail. Disney is bad. It's disgusting. The things that have come out about that place. There's my baby bird. Hi. Say hello. Come here. Say hello. Say hello. Baby bird. Yeah, you drew a picture. Yeah, and nobody told me I was muted neither. At least y'all warn Squid and everybody when they're muted. Hi, your babies. Y'all wanted bird chat, you got bird chat. Baby bird's dancing. I had a horrible blonde moment. Hi, Musie. Good morning. Say good morning. Say good morning, birds. Yeah. Say good morning. You gonna get in your spot? Y'all are backwards. Come here. Baby bird. There you go. Oh, there will be quiet moments because I have children that want to fight and argue in the background. Yeah, it's not showing you in my green room. I'm not muted now. I had to mute though because little man was screaming at his sister. I am impatiently waiting. Oh, we got 1 minute. Okay, let's go. Screen share. Landon John Thomas. Yes, unless y'all want your eardrums blown out because he was having a tantrum. Can we not? Pick your chips up.
Jordan Norm is a podcaster and YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. He relies on Riverside.
So if I ever need to film guests, but we're literally on the other side of the planet.
It literally feels...
Can y'all hear it? He has his granddaddy's temper. So yeah, I guess it is my temper. Absolutely amusing. So many. Here comes Diddy, I think. I know cameras aren't allowed inside the courthouse. Oh, awesome, Musi. Sorry, I was working on a to-do list and trying to get the stream set up. No voices on the video. Let me see. How about now? It's really just the media chattering amongst themselves. They all swarmed that vehicle like a bunch of flies on shit, literally. I agree, Bob. I agree. They should at least allow audio mic inside so we can hear the trial. Hold, please. You think it's the kids, Bob? I don't get why the media won't back up. There should be a barrier between, I mean, there's a whole little fence there. They shouldn't be letting them bombard the van like that. That one guy has his toboggan on backwards. Leave it to me to point out the random. Last time they all came together. I wonder, after the hearing he had about what he was doing from his cell, and about supposedly the prosecution took his attorney note, supposedly, after the raid, and finding out that he had his kids running his Instagram from outside. If they will allow, I mean, obviously they have to allow the family, but it might be Diddy with the police there, but surely not. That's not a police transport. Hello, Chris. Welcome in. I just don't see how the judge would let him out. I just don't. He's already been denied, what, twice, Bob? 3 times. So he's already been denied for it 3 times, and now the stuff's coming out about him messing with witnesses. I feel like he's wasting his time. I feel like he's safer in the shoe in prison than he is on the streets with what he has done. I have another question. With what he has done and stuff we don't actually fully know about yet, do y'all think they will Epstein him? Or do you think they will take more precautions to prevent another Epstein? I'm really curious. Bob, you was right. It's kids. Oh, it looks like the whole family. So where's the little white girl he adopted? Isn't that suspicious? I agree, Musie. They're not going to release everything because it is such a high profile case. But we know. Coop, I highly believe Epstein didn't delete himself. Can't convince me. Of how high profile that was and what he done and what he knew about other people, can't convince me that he deleted himself. I would not be surprised, Gail. Oprah is going to do everything she can to cover her own. But we know. We know. We're not dumb. He did more than groom them. So much more. So much worse. Look at poor Bieber. Bieber spoke out finally. He did much worse than just groom them. Exactly. That. I guarantee you, most of Hollywood, majority of Hollywood, is just as nasty and dirty and filthy as Diddy, as Epstein. Don't get me on the Tupac rabbit hole. Don't get me on that one. Demi Moore? Was she listed as a victim or an assailant? Wow. Listen, 50 been trying to feed us the red pill for years, trying to wake people up. Not just there there's many others that have been trying to say, look, wake up. Pay attention to the ones that support Trump. They're the ones not involved. And they know more than we think they do. And that is why they are so involved on the right side. I am so glad Bieber found the Lord and Bieber changed his life. I grew up with Bieber. Bieber's not much younger than me. I can almost bet that the Diddy list and the Epstein list align like a puzzle piece. Let's not forget Beyonce. She's the queen bee. Yes, hearing about DiCaprio broke my heart. He was one of my favorites at one point in time. Look at all the actors that have died in the last 10 to 12 years. Michael Jackson being one of them. They know. They were trying to tell us, and then poof. Part of me thinks MJ's not really deceased. Justin Bieber is on the list because he was one of the children that Diddy did things to. Hey, Paul. So many sports figures. Bieber's already come out and has told most of his story. Bieber was at those parties, but he wasn't an assailant. He is a victim. Bieber is one victim. Oh, where did someone shared it on TikTok, and that's how I found it. I've yet to find it on YouTube.
Morning flurries.
Give me the skip button.
The return of special traditions like candy.
It did. I feel for Justin. I feel for a lot of the Nickelodeon kids. Hi, Rogue. Now get this. I don't know if y'all remember the Amanda show on Nickelodeon, but Amanda Bynes went from being a victim to now being one of the sickos. I get it, Bob. A lot of people don't want on the clock app. I've been distancing myself from the clock app, but you find out a lot of information on the clock app that you won't find in mainstream media. Exactly, Tim. Pay attention to Beyonce's newest lyrics. She's she tells us what she done. Now I sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, but too many conspiracies have come true for them to still be conspiracies. That's just my opinion. Yeah, if you're just scrolling like the FYP of TikTok, it's fine. But that's where I got my social media start was TikTok. I started during COVID and I got myself in decently deep into the TikTok world and no. I like it over here better. Rogue TikTok. We call it Talk app. Right, Rogue? That's my thing. Like, too many of them have come true for them to still be conspiracies. All the Kardashians are involved, Gail. All of them. Every single one of them. Yeah. Some of them have been debunked. I agree with you on that one. But the ones that have come true, there's so many that ended up being true. Hey, like all of us back in the day about the aliens, and now they're speaking out and saying that they were all true this whole time, but they brainwashed us to believe we were crazy or that everyone was just seeing things. Come on, pay attention to the movies. If the movies that you watch feel real, good lord, wee woo, I'm on this now. I can hear myself think. I wonder what's all the EMT showing up around the courthouse. But the things with the aliens, the government finally told us the truth on. The stuff with our food, like we were discussing in Megan's live the other day. So many of us have been screaming that about our food for years. Oh, I need to watch Rosalind's JFK series because I love me some JFK. I doubt it, Paul. He's already been denied 3 times. And now he's in even more hot water. I highly doubt he'll get it. If he does, I'll be shocked. Yeah. Oh, go make dinner, Musy. I will probably be here a while, depending on how long this will take. Yeah, that's true. You have no business in there, sir. Get in here and eat your tater chips. Oh, I agree. I don't see the logic in him getting out other than him trying to delete witnesses or him trying to get to the witnesses to manipulate them into not speaking out. Yeah, it's currently 12:57 here. I'm on Central Time. Leave the birds alone, sir. You have chips. You don't eat Pop-Tarts. I swear, little boys are bottomless pits. Can't keep groceries in the house. Landon! Oh no. Not until I don't think we will get a whole list until other arrests are made. I wonder if they will put witnesses in protection with how high profile. Oh, they don't. $27. That's the same age as Slug. You think so? I feel like his children are also victims, but that's just my opinion. I do want to point out, though, we've seen his children get out of that van. Where's the little white girl he adopted? That is true, Rogue. His assistant and his mule. I think there's less going on than we know about with other actors in the trafficking. And they're using Diddy as the big boom, the front man, to cover up all the others. That is true, Tim. Oh, is he back? He's Dad's very demanding. When he wants something, he wants it right then. That is just how he is. Yes, I am. I don't know how to feel about the Usher thing, but as for Bieber, I have watched him change his life in a good way, especially since Diddy's been arrested. So I don't feel like he was ever the perpetrator, but he was treated extremely badly. See, I counted twins. Is Bob still here? I don't know exactly how many. I think there's 4. I might be wrong. Yeah, that sounds about right. I agree. Because he already tried to run away when the very first raid. Rogue, did you see that Bieber is starting to write gospel songs? And he's so good at it. I knew Usher was a victim at one point, but now that he's a full grown man, sometimes they don't heal. And part of me believes that Usher's just as bad. I agree, Rogue. Wholeheartedly. Haley saved his life. Hi, Lulu. I thought the island was off the coast of Florida. I may have thought wrong. The rise and fall of Diddy. And he's not really saying anything important. It's the normal mumbo jumbo he talks. Yeah. One of his songs come across my FYP. And it was beautiful. Yeah, because sometimes the victims don't heal from their trauma of what they went through as a child. They don't seek help like they should, especially in the males. It's not me being sexist, but look how most men of that generation was raised. Suck it up, buttercup, get over it. And then they sit in their heads. And then they become just as twisted as the person that did the things they did to them. Why the hell are we looking at Diddy in a towel? That is Diddy, right? Yeah. I'm sorry. Y'all can keep her. We don't want her. Absolutely, Tina. I have not allowed my children to watch any Disney movies since I found out what I found out about Disney. Disney is disgusting. At this, as disgusting as Hollywood is, it's no longer about human against human. It's good versus evil. See, Ellen's been under hot water ever since Epstein. She is on the Epstein list, and I believe she's also on the Diddy list. So, like, she's double whammied. Absolutely rogue. I agree 100%. It took me years to somewhat heal from my trauma. But I'm not out here acting crazy. Like, I'm out here fighting to be a better me. You gotta choose to be better than your assailant. You can't constantly live in that victim mindset. They are. We were just discussing that at the beginning, that we got to look at the Epstein list and look at the Diddy list, and I guarantee you they fit together like a puzzle. Go down that rabbit hole, Chris. Go down that rabbit hole. That's all I'm going to say. Walt was the original. Just go down the Disney rabbit hole. Exactly, Lulu. Carry your trauma. If you let it make you better, you let it make you stronger. You don't become, for instance, you don't become like Lynette. Hell yeah, it is, Rogue. I developed CPTSD and bipolar disorder between my childhood trauma, what my ex done to me, and then what I've gone through with my dad's hoe. I had to experience that dark path to realize I am not what happened to me. I am better than what had happened to me. That's why I used her as an example. Don't do what she did. Don't make yourself a permanent victim. If you choose to live in that permanent victim mindset, you'll never, ever heal from your trauma. I mean, you never truly heal from your trauma anyway. but you can clear it from your mind and your heart. You can learn to forgive for yourself to heal. Yes, ma'am. I agree. I feel that 100%, Miss Musi. My original abuser was my stepdad. Guess what? He's still in the picture. And I have a love-hate relationship with that man. Exactly, Rogue. That's what I was telling the chat yesterday is the best decision me and my husband ever made was moving out of my hometown. I couldn't heal when I was in my hometown. We now live an hour away, but we're in a completely different state. And that was the best choice we ever made. Yeah, I didn't get therapy as a child. I didn't touch therapy until earlier this year. So I've lived with it for 30 years, but I didn't let it define me. I feel you, baby. Sometimes that's the best thing we can do is to create that boundary. And let me tell you, I used to fight to fix relationships, toxic or not. Now I'll cut somebody off the drop of a hat because it's not worth my mental health. We'll cut somebody off in a heartbeat. I've come too far to let it destroy me again. It's like the stuff with Dad. I had got to the point to where I was like, F it. She can have it. Because it was destroying my mental health to keep trying to fight for what was rightfully mine. It was destroying me mentally. But Dad came through to Musi the other night and was like, no ma'am, you're gonna fight this fight. So yeah, here we are. I agree, Lulu. It took me a long time to get to where I am now. Like I told y'all yesterday, after Dad passed, I did some really messed up things that I didn't deserve being forgiven for, but not only did God forgive me, but my husband forgave me. And I've worked really hard to get to where I am now. I can...
The pads, there's a photo of a pad without legal on it. Again, this is all in relation to whether there was a big sweep at the Metropolitan Detention
Thank you,
Center,
Frog.
and photographs were taken of Sean Combs' notebooks. And the question was, were 19 pages or other materials improperly photographed of his conversations with his attorneys about legal
Here,
strategy,
let me
what
skip
was
back and
written
see
on the
what he
pads.
was
What do you take away from
saying.
this?
That's right. So I'm not surprised that the judges
From court, Sean Combs' lawyer, Mr. Rico, says the family of Mr. Sean Love Combs are here. They traveled a long way. Judge Subram, thank you for being here. Mr. Agnifilo, tell me about the legal pads. And Mark Agnifilo responds, the first time I saw them was Tuesday. Elizabeth, this feels like in response to the issue that happened earlier this week.
Rogue, I am totally down for that. Hey, me and Squid's talking about doing a baking stream next Friday. We could bake and have girl therapy. That sounds Picasso. Okay, I'm gonna mute and run to the potty, and I'm just gonna let the video play out for you guys.
within New
More
York.
people are talking about Diddy than they are Mike Jeffries. And more people, the argument would be, are concerned about being wrapped up in Sean Diddy Combs'
It's
allegations or anything like that.
It is true. It is true. I think with high-profile defendants in prison, though, there's always a risk that they could be possibly more targeted or sort of more attention, negative or positive, is paid on them while they're in jail. Versus, you know, if he's sentenced to home confinement, he has a lot of resources and a lot of wealth still at his readily available hands.
Yep. All right. We had a question from Sean D. Cole on YouTube. Nemo, I'll throw this to you. What would be your best possible defense strategy?
Thank God I'm not doing defense work anymore, but I think the best defense strategy would be to argue that the sexual activity happened, but it was consensual. That gets rid of the force, fraud, or coercion. The challenge is if they do supersede and they add sex trafficking of minors, that argument goes out the window because minors can't consent. Now, Diddy is allegedly contacting witnesses, and there's probably a few ways that he can persuade them to either do a 180 or not show up at trial and testify. He can outright bribe them, pay them off through civil settlements and judgments. He can blackmail them. He can try to threaten them. But I mean, his best defense is for these witnesses to go sideways. That's really the only defense in this case.
All right. We have an update from court. Sean Combs' lawyer, Mr. Rico, says the family of Mr. Sean Love Combs are here. They traveled a long way. Judge Subramanian says, thank you for being here. Mr. Agnifilo, tell me about the legal pads. And Mark Agnifilo responds, the first time I saw them was Tuesday. Elizabeth, this feels like in response to the issue that happened earlier this week about whether the government improperly photographed potentially privileged materials of Sean Combs. I didn't think that issue was going to be decided today, or at least discussed today. I thought they were going to be briefing it, and maybe the judge would have to decide if there was a privilege issue later on. Actually, before I throw it to you, another update. As we sit, this is from Mark Agnifilo. As we sit here today, I'm not sure when legal was written on each of them. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. Different members of the defense team were telling him to write legal on the pads. There's a photo of a pad without legal on it. Again, this is all in relation to whether there was a big sweep at the Metropolitan Detention Center, and photographs were taken of Sean Combs' notebooks. And the question was, were 19 pages or other materials improperly photographed of his conversations with his attorneys about legal strategy, what was written on the pads? What do you take away from this?
That's right. So I'm not surprised that the judge is discussing it a little bit. The judge had said earlier this week that he will hold separate hearings regarding whether these notes could be actually ultimately used at trial in May, and that's sort of later on down the line. But he did say in a filing earlier this week, be prepared to talk about what happened with that legal sort of note that was on the papers and where did it I'm not surprised that he wants to talk about that, because I think a big part of what the prosecution is going to try to argue to prevent him from being released on bail is potential witness tampering. And what they said earlier this week is that there was some evidence within the notes of him, you know, trying to contact witnesses through third parties, trying to get family members to post, you know, positive things about him on social media. So I think there's a little bit of an overlap there.
And there is certain material that was photographed that will not now be used as evidence in this bail argument. The judge said, throw it out, throw out these copies. You're not going to be able to argue that prosecution to support your case. But Elizabeth does raise an interesting point here, Nima. The idea, and I think this will come up, was Sean Combs developing this social media campaign through his family, really is centered around his birthday, to post positive messages about his birthday. There was this video of his family wishing him happy birthday. You can hear him on the other line from the MDC. He seemed to be happy. And the idea was he purposely orchestrated this social media campaign to influence a potential jury. And the idea would be, if he's orchestrating this behind bars, you can't let him out on pretrial release. What else would he do? Now, I'm curious your thoughts on this. Some would say, and the prosecution says, we have evidence to prove that was his intent, was to influence a potential jury. Do you think that's strong, though? I mean, we're not even close to a trial. Do you think? And also, he's a public figure. Doesn't he have a right to change the public narrative about what everybody's been saying about him?
Jesse, I'm as pro-prosecution as they come, and I believe that they have evidence that he's contacting witnesses, and that is witness tampering and obstruction. But to argue against a social media public relations campaign is really a bridge too far, in my opinion. If you're the prosecution, you got to kind of maintain your credibility. Obviously, there's the courtroom and there's the court of public opinion. There's no gag order or other order preventing him from doing this. So don't make arguments that not necessarily aren't nonsensical, that aren't really advancing your case. Focus on the witnesses and what matters, and you don't have to worry about Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and whatever.
Well, it was interesting because his son took over his social media account. His Instagram account was posting like music videos of his father and behind-the-scenes footage of his father, and we did a sidebar on what that might mean, and now we see what the prosecution is taking away from some social media posts. Okay, we have an update from court. Nima, I'll just start with you on this. So Sean Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, said, so it's clear that on November 1st, the sweep, which I had mentioned, the sweep of the MDC, they did not all say legal, meaning it was not printed legal on his Sean Combs notepads. The judge says, the pad you handed up to me, did it say legal on it on November 1st? Agnifilo says, I'm not sure. The judge responds, moving forward, make sure representations are true. Ooh, felt like a little bit accusing the defense of not being totally transparent, right?
I think so, and it's not the first time. Going back to that video from 2016, the defense said that DHS leaked it, and there's really no evidence to support that. And I understand that they're trying to advocate on behalf of your client, but Judge Subramanian, let's be honest, this is a Democratic appointee. He has a civil background, and I'm really surprised he's taking so much time to address this privilege issue. Obviously, the attorney-client privilege is sacred, but we're talking about 20 pages. Judge, take the documents, review them in camera and chambers, and make your decision. Why do you need briefing on this? It's not something that's rocket science. Any young lawyer can determine whether the documents are privileged or not.
We have another update from court. Elizabeth, I'll turn to you on this one. This is from the judge. Ms. Slavic, this is referring to Christine Slavic. She is the AUSA, the Assistant United States Attorney, the prosecutor in this case, one of the prosecutors. Ms. Slavic, what is the status of Mr. Combs' laptop? And then she responds, the laptop for him to review the discovery at the MDC. The idea is to preload the information he's allowed to have at the MDC on the laptop. There is a protective order. Interesting they're talking about this because one of the arguments put forward by Sean Combs' defense team is he doesn't have the adequate resources at the MDC to properly prepare for what is a complicated sex trafficking and racketeering trial. What is this exchange about, you think?
Right. I think they're probably pointing to an issue with privacy. And like you said, him being able to properly be able to put on his defense. If he's someone who's in home detention, he can meet with his attorneys in fair confidence, discuss things more freely. In prison, you're really not afforded those same privacy rights. So I think that's an argument that his team is going to be putting on.
Nima, got a question. This is from Sean D. Cole again on YouTube. Please keep the questions coming if you have a question about this hearing. If you have a question about this case, make sure to submit them now. This is, with this being the presiding judge, meaning Judge Arun Subramanian, is this Sean Combs' last chance for bail? I don't believe so. I believe that he could go to the Second Circuit and had petitioned the Second Circuit, but then put it on pause, waiting for Judge Subramanian to ultimately decide this issue, right?
Yes. So when you appeal, that really removes jurisdiction or the ability of the trial court to make a decision. So obviously the case was transferred to Judge Subramanian, but they had appealed to the Second Circuit, which is the highest court before that appeal. But now what they want is another bite at the apple, see if the judge is going to disagree with the prior magistrate judge and district judge and actually release Combs on bail, which would be very surprising in my opinion, before they take it up on appeal.
Elizabeth, I'll turn to you on that. Again, the reason we know some of what the defense's arguments are is because I read the brief to the Second Circuit. They asked to put it on, they called it, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the legal term, abeyance. They put the appeal on abeyance and said, pause it. We're going to go to Judge Subramanian. If he actually grants bail, this is all moot, forget it. But, you know, do you think the Second Circuit would be more amenable to his arguments?
I think it would be a bit more difficult. You know, obviously, whenever you appeal a case, the appellate judge is really more prone to being guided by former precedent. It doesn't mean that judges don't overturn decisions. They do all the time, but they are more privy to be bound to prior decisions. Here in this instance, this is his third attempt before the hearing today to be released on bail. You have two prior judges who have said no, you know, for various reasons. So I think it would be harder in his appeal process.
All right, talking about the bail, we now have an update on this. So Judge Subramanian says, on the bail application, I don't have to deal with the Bustani case. The defense is saying there are extensive conditions proposed, including 24/7 security. What about the Fox case? Prosecutor responds, there was no RICO charge in that case. The judge said agreed. So now they're going through some of the case law that was debated back and forth between the prosecution and the defense. You know, Nima, I think what's really interesting, one of the arguments put forward, and I think this is, you tell me if it's legitimate or not, the defense is saying, you're just hearing allegations from the prosecution about that he's a danger here. They're relying on the allegations in the indictment. They're saying that he reached out to witnesses and victims. Don't you need to hold a hearing? Shouldn't you call witnesses to prove that? Now, it's not trying to, they don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. They're not trying to say he's guilty of obstruction, but doesn't there have to be more than just taking the government's word for it?
Not necessarily if the judge takes the government's word for it. And, you know, we've talked about Jeffries, but I think the more on point case, recent case in New York is Sam Bankman-Fried. Here's someone who was granted bond, started contacting witnesses. There was electronic evidence to support that he was reaching out to witnesses and trying to alter and change their testimony. And his bond was revoked and he was in custody all throughout trial. So I think that's the case. Look, I believe the government that they have evidence that these witnesses are being contacted by Combs or through intermediaries. They're not going to raise these allegations unless they have the receipts to prove it. So hopefully they do so. But I don't think you need a full-blown evidentiary hearing in a case like this or any bond hearing.
Elizabeth, you would agree with me that there was no reality where Sean Combs believed he was not going to make bail. The reason he was so cooperative with law enforcement, he surrendered his passport, said he was going to sell his plane, came to New York to be arrested, hadn't left the country, right? Even though he knew he was going to be arrested. It seemed to me he thought he was legitimately going to make bail, that he would be on house arrest for a year, 2 years till trial happened. I don't think he thought that this would actually be a reality, right?
I agree. And my theory is that all of these steps were taken by his attorneys and by his legal team to hopefully assure that they can show the judge, you know, he's not a flight risk. He's put up this $50 million bond. He's prepared to put his home up for collateral. All of these steps he surrendered to his arrest. So all of these steps to put forward to try to argue this is not someone who's going to flee. He can be trusted with home arrest. So I don't think he anticipated this.
Going to that, Elizabeth, we just have another update from court. Again, we're providing live updates about what is happening in that courtroom, considering there are no cameras there. Trust me, I could go on and on about how much of a mistake I think that is. But the judge says, I want you to address the proposed conditions, meaning the bail conditions. And as we talked about, $50 million bail package, 24/7 home confinement, no internet use, no phone use, limited visitors, visitor logs. Prosecutor says there has to be some level of trust that the defendant will follow him. Here, he will not, meaning not follow the rules. He cannot be trusted. Consider his conduct in custody after the two judges' findings, meaning there were two previous judges, Judge Carter, Judge Tanofsky, who both decided that Sean Combs was not entitled to pretrial release, not entitled to bail. What do you think about that?
Correct. Yeah, that's a really fair point. The two prior judges have denied and said he's not allowed on bail. So when you have those two decisions against you, I think most defendants would say, okay, I need to be extra cautious, make sure I'm following all the rules. I'm not incurring any potential legal troubles moving down the line. There's allegations that, he has contacted parties through third parties. He's made phone calls. So I think there's a substantial amount of information there to show that there is possibility that he could try to tamper with witnesses or obstruct certain evidence.
Nima, one of the arguments put forward by the prosecution was if he is able, if you take the allegations as true, he's able to use other inmates' PAC numbers to make essentially calls to people that are not listed on his contact list. If he's able to use three-way phone calls from jail to have improper communications, what the prosecution says, is there any belief that he wouldn't manipulate a private security team that's supposed to watch him?
Of course, that's working for him as well. And like you said, that's an absolute rule violation. Can't use another inmate's PAC number, can't make three-way calls. And apparently he's doing all this. And when he was out, he contacted a witness dozens of times. So this is all evidence of obstruction. If I'm the government, what I do is I supersede, I add those obstruction charges, not necessarily because I think that's going to add additional time, but I think that's going to be helpful evidence for the jury to hear at trial that Diddy is trying to dissuade these witnesses. That's going to bring all that evidence in.
To show that he's guilty. Why would he be obstructing unless, of course, he thought he couldn't win this on the merits? He's trying to actually obstruct the case, influence witnesses because he knows he's guilty of that. That would be the argument. Elizabeth, we have another update from court. The prosecutor says his attorneys are enabling his flouting of the Bureau of Prisons rules. Consider the labeling of the pads after the fact, meaning they marked it legal after the fact. That's interesting. Even family members, and I said that the idea would be that he's enlisting his family members to create social media campaigns, reach out to people. The judge says, what's your response if Mr. Combs says, even if they don't trust me, there'd be 24/7 security? Prosecutor responds, if he can't comply in a custodial setting, he will not comply if released. What type of security firm? They suggested a co-conspirator, one whose phone was taken only the day before. Didn't know that. That's who the potential security firm is. The second suggestion was a defense investigator in this case. And the prosecutor goes on to say that investigator has been out contacting witnesses. Essentially, they work for him. This would be the defendant buying his way out. The judge said, you've conceded that Bustani's bar does not apply here. You've cited his wealth to release him, so he can't use it. We'll get to that second argument in a second, but if that's true, this is who he was proposing to watch him?
Yeah, it's a fair point. And again, I think if you consider if he's, let's say, confined to his home and home confinement, I think there's even more opportunity for him to be able to utilize the team and the people around him, whoever they're working for, to be able to work within his favor. And also, this is not somebody who's going to be confined to a tiny little studio apartment. He has huge homes, huge estates. There's a lot of room for him to potentially go about continuing possibly the behavior that the prosecution is alleging he's already been doing.
One of the other interesting arguments that I love to talk about here, Nima, and I'm curious if it comes up, prosecutors said there's a two-tiered justice system. Why would it be fair that Sean Combs has the resources and the wealth to turn his home into a private prison, and he should be out waiting trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges when somebody with lesser means wouldn't be able to do that and they don't get bail? Now, the defense says, wait a second. The only reason we're proposing such an expansive and expensive bail package like this is because of the very problems, the very concerns that the prosecution has. You say it's his wealth, that's a concern. Well, we're going to show you, we're going to create such a package that alleviates any of those concerns. The reason it looks like this, and it's so expansive and includes 24/7 monitoring and all this, is because of what the prosecution said. You can't have a sword and a shield at the same time. You say he's wealthy, you say he has the resources to flee, to do what he wants. Well, we're going to use that to try to negate those concerns. Where do you stand with that, Nima?
Well, it's not a flight issue, but a danger issue, and no other defendant, and I don't think the Jeffries case is similar, would be released with these types of allegations. If we did, we'd be treating celebrities or folks with hundreds of millions of dollars differently because of their wealth. So I think that's a very strong argument for the government.
We have another back and forth that I want to tell you about. It's almost like the judge is listening to our back and forth, because this is what just happened. And by the way, I really, from a legal point of view, I really am respecting Judge Subramanian. He's challenging both sides appropriately here. This is what he says, Elizabeth. The AUSA, Slavic, the prosecutor says, we're not seeking his continued detention based on his wealth, but rather danger, risk of flight, and obstruction. The judge says, is obstruction your main argument? The prosecutor says, danger to others. So the judge says, so not risk of flight? And the prosecutor says, we still rely on that too. What'd you make of that?
I think it's important that they don't forfeit any of the arguments, and I think they're all equally important. I do think I'm glad that they've highlighted the danger issue. Again, so much of this comes back to that video of him and Cassie Ventura. He has assaulted her on that video. He later admitted to that. So that's something that prosecution can point to and say, look, there's a possibility that could happen to other people as well. It's right here in black and white on video. So I think that's one of the more strong arguments. But I think it's important that the prosecution doesn't forfeit any of the other arguments, including obstruction of justice, so that they can put on a fair trial.
Nima, that risk of flight is interesting because the prosecutors say he's facing 15 years to life in prison on these charges. He has a lot of incentive to flee. His response would be, first of all, my family, my livelihood is here. I'm not going to flee the country. I've been trying to sell my plane, my passport. I could have fled multiple times. I didn't. Do you think the risk of flight works more for Sean Combs or the prosecutors?
I don't think it's a very strong argument for the prosecution. This is a style issue, right? Credibility is really important. And when the defense writes illegal on a pad after the fact, that's a problem. And if you're the prosecution, you want to save face. And if this is someone who's surrendered passports, has been willing to sell his private jets, his family's here, I don't think the risk of flight is a very good argument compared to the obstruction and the danger arguments. So I would focus on those two. And obviously you don't want to concede anything, but really just focus on, because you only need one to win, right? And I think the danger is the strongest argument.
You mean you only need to convince the judge whether it's obstruction or risk of flight or danger? You don't need all three?
Generally, it's going to be danger or risk of flight, but the obstruction is important as well. So the standard is under federal law that detention is appropriate if there's no condition or combination that can guarantee the defendant's appearance at trial, and he or she is either a risk of flight or a danger to the community. Now, obstruction can come in as well, but it's typically danger.
Elizabeth, we have another update from court talking about obstruction. The judge says, tell me about obstruction. Is he listening to Law and Crime? Is there like somebody, does he have a microphone here or something? Tell me about obstruction. So he asks, he says, tell me about obstruction, prosecutor. Prosecutor Slavic says, he's continuing violation of the rules, meaning, as we talked about, what's happening or allegedly happening in jail. The judge says, is running a PR campaign obstruction, meaning the social media posts? The prosecutor says that's not what we have here. Rather, it's his concerted effort to impact the integrity of these proceedings. Prosecutor says, he says, I want to reach the jurors. I need only one. Ah, so that's so interesting. That's the first time that we actually maybe heard, they said they would have evidence to prove that this social media campaign was about influencing the jury. So he allegedly, there's some communication from Sean Combs where he talks about, I only need one, meaning only need to convince one juror. The judge says he's not permitted to engage in any he's not permitted to engage in any conduct to impact the jury pool. That's what the judge is asking. Prosecutor says his intent, it's obstructive conduct. He's violated the so-called gag order. He's the one who asked for that order.
Right. I think the social media argument is a bit of a tough one to make. Again, as we've noted, he's a massive public figure. People have continued to post on social media about this, people in his family and his friends. So I think that's a bit of a reach. But I think it's important that the prosecution highlights, again, any sort of evidence where he specifically states, I'm trying to target potential jurors here. He might have said that with social media, a little bit tougher. But I think the stronger points lie in if there's any sort of evidence that says, he's trying to potentially contact witnesses through to what prosecution is going to alter their testimony, sort of more favorable testimony. I think that's what's going to be more persuasive to the
By the way, that gag order, I thought that was about not releasing grand jury materials or information that hasn't been disclosed to the public. I mean, if you're posting about your birthday, you're posting your music videos, I don't feel that the gag order applies, no?
I don't think so either. Again, unless they're commenting on something specific regarding the alleged details of this case or the indictment or anything like that. I think general content posted on social media, I think it's expected even in cases involving more private figures, let alone someone this public.
Nima, do you agree about the gag
Right.
order?
I agree. It's not within the limitations of the order. And again, this is just not a good argument for the prosecution. I agree that him trying to influence jurors, that is, but just generally a blanket argument against a PR campaign and social media post, not good. No judge in this country is going to prohibit someone from posting on social media. Just let's be honest, this is the biggest trial in the country right now, especially now that Donald Trump has won and his criminal problems have gone away. Nothing even compares to the Sean Diddy Combs trial. People are going to be talking about it. Everyone is covering it. Traditional social media. I've done dozens of interviews just on Law and Crime about it. So for a judge to say that you can't post on social media about your birthday with your family, I mean, forget about it. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. No appellate court would uphold that order.
Clearly, you do not believe that Kanye West being sued for copyright infringement is the bigger case, and that's shocking. I didn't expect that from you. Okay, we have another update from court. This is from the prosecutor. The court entered the order on October 25th. He started his campaign on October 27th. He couldn't even comply for 2 days. Said, what about the we have something. What about the Jeffries Abercrombie case where the government agreed to release on $10 million bond? And then the prosecutor says, we did a letter. And by the way, that's the letter that we read before, where basically the government talked about distinguishing Mike Jeffries. It's not only his age. We're talking about the idea that he's not charged with sex trafficking. There was not these repeated patterns of violence like they allege with Sean Combs. And so, again, now it seems like they're getting into that issue, which I think is going to be really, really important. Again, just for our viewers turning in, Elizabeth, you see that the case of Mike Jeffries, who has been arrested and charged with sex trafficking of young men using force, fraud, and coercion. That is a slightly different case because he was granted $10 million bail. He was arrested after Sean Combs was arrested. But that is a different case that you think prosecutors might have a struggle with.
That's right. I think there's some overlap. Again, it's involving massive public figures. It's involving trafficking charges. But I think there's a big difference, in terms of the charges, the amount of civil lawsuits. Again, they're alleged civil lawsuits, but against Sean Combs, there's currently over 100 with similar charges. I haven't seen anything similar to that extent of Jeffries. And also, again, it keeps coming back to that video. There hasn't been any form of video evidence, at least that we've seen in the public domain. Correct. Yeah, with the Jeffries case that specifically highlights what a danger he could possibly be to the public. Again, at least that we know of yet.
So we're going to go back to more questions that we have from our YouTubers. So if anybody has a question about the case or the hearing, make sure to submit it. Nima, we have a question. This is from Sean D. Cole. Sean D. Cole, so active. Thank you so much. Does the defense argument for bail convince you that he should be granted bail, Nima?
Sean, absolutely not. Sean Diddy Combs should not be released. He is a danger to the community. He probably will be convicted and will spend decades in federal prison. This is a very serious case with a lot of victims. He should not be released.
Here's the thing, and by the way, you'll see this anytime you hear appellate arguments or even if you hear general arguments in a court of law. The judge will ask pointed questions from each side when he's questioning them, okay? So I want to be clear, even though you're seeing tough questions for the prosecution, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to side with the defense and vice versa. Having said this, I'm going to read you the latest from court. The judge, the prosecutor, they're talking now about the 2016 video of Cassandra Ventura, or I believe that's what they're talking about. Because the prosecutor says, I think the better comparison is the two prior denials of bail here, but the judge said, what about the claim that the government spliced the video? He said he apologized. That's the point. Remember, Sean Combs apologized on Instagram 2 days after CNN published that video of him purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura back in 2016. The judge said, why did you use the splice video, not the original? And the prosecutor said, it was public. So it makes me wonder, is he open to the argument that there's more context to that video, as the defense says?
Possibly. To me, it sounds like the judge is asking a bit more open-ended questions to get all the information that he can to properly render a decision about this bail hearing. I think if there's any sort of indication that that video of him and Cassandra Ventura in that hotel hallway was doctored in any way or edited, you still have the actual footage of him assaulting her. And again, as you mentioned, he didn't negate that. He didn't say, oh, this is AI or this is fake. He admitted to that. So I think defense team is trying to use is there's indication that she tried to flee, freak off. I think one of the things his defense team called it was a sad glimpse in a consensual relationship, which I think is going to be their main theme in defending this case is these were all consensual acts. So I think he's just trying to get information here. I think it's hard to negate the facts of that video.
So, Nima, I'll give you a chance to respond, but here's another update. The cell phone footage, this is from the prosecutor. The cell phone footage was grand jury material, and we didn't want the defendant to be able to retaliate against the grand jury witness. We did add blurring of the victim's face. In 2016, the defendant bribed hotel security $100,000 to make it go away. Your thoughts on what we're hearing about this?
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because this is not edited. This is why this is important. First of all, we know that Sean Combs paid your $100,000. I've heard numbers, apparently $100,000 to try to keep this video. Now, in November, Cassie files her lawsuit. Combs, through his attorney, says that this is all these are lies. This is all fabrication. This is a money grab. His homes are raided in March. Again, still denies everything. Only after CNN gets this video in May does Combs finally admit to lying for 6 months through his attorney. So he can't be trusted. Here's someone who's denied everything, but you can't deny this video. That's why his apology is important.
How much does it matter, Elizabeth, that this could be connected to a freak-off or sex trafficking, or does it matter that it's just a violent episode? Because, the latest update from court, the prosecutor says, does it matter if he threw a vase or the contents of a vase? He admitted to it and apologized for it. This took place in the middle of a freak-off. The U.S. has evidence a commercial sex worker was in the hotel room at the time, so they're really trying to say this is evidence of sex trafficking.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's going to be important for the prosecution to say, you know, she wasn't just fleeing for any reason. It was specifically to flee a freak off. Because again, one of the things that the defense is going to try to push is that they were in the middle of a consensual act. Regardless, I think you also have one of the things that was mentioned in the indictment was the multiple assaults that he allegedly inflicted upon women. This is clear evidence of that.
We have more questions from our YouTubers, the best YouTubers in the business. All right, Nima. This is a question from Sally on YouTube. Once Diddy finally goes to trial, how long do you think the full trial will last?
I think it's going to last about a month or so. I mean, the parties have given some estimates about for the prosecution and 1 week for the defense, if I recall correctly. That means I think the defense's case is entirely or mostly going to be based on the cross-examination of those witnesses. They're going to come after them very aggressively. Now, it's still pretty early to know who exactly the government's going to call, and that's important because you have individuals who have filed civil lawsuits. They're going to be cross-examined to say this isn't about criminal justice, this is about money. So I'm sure the government is going to want to put their very best witnesses and victims on the stand because we know that the defense is going to come after them and come after them very aggressively.
All right, we have another update from court. This is from the prosecutor. This is devastating evidence for the trial. This is, again, the 2016 video. It shows why he cannot be released on bail. He is violent and is committed to covering up his crimes. The evidence against him continues to mount. We've learned of punching and kick partners. So, again, that danger element to the bail analysis. I do have a question, Nima, for you. This is from Sean D. Kolb, again on YouTube. Any chance for a plea deal, and is there any chance the judge will accept it? I'll give my thoughts, but first your thoughts.
I don't think there's much of a chance at all because for there to be a deal, it has to be something that Diddy would accept. And when you're talking about these types of crimes, I mean, the sentencing guidelines are through the roof. Now, maybe he'll get less than the decades in federal prison, I said, if and when he's convicted. But this is someone that doesn't want to be in bail for even the next several months until trial in May. He's not going to voluntarily, give up his empire and concede this. By the way, let's go back and say why I don't think there's going to be a deal. Let's talk about Cassie Ventura, who demanded $30 million not to file a lawsuit when the statute of limitations was coming up in New York State, where Jesse and Elizabeth are right now. He only wanted to pay her $10 million. For $20 million, his whole life fell apart. Do you think this is someone that's going to admit to anything, plead guilty in court?
I
and
agree with
receive
you. I
years
agree
in
with
federal-
you. That seems to me the only thing. What happens if they say, we have evidence to charge your family with obstruction or other counts? We will not do that if you decide to plead guilty.
Well, family can be an absolute game changer. I'm going to be honest. As a former federal prosecutor, I put more than 1,000 people in prison, and oftentimes, people would plead to exonerate their family members. So I think that could be a potential game changer. But just as the current indictment is and state of the case with no conspirators, I think Diddy's not going to take any deal.
And to be clear, there's no evidence, well, other than some of the assertions that they're putting forward in these letters about, using his family to, engage in improper conduct or contact outside of jail, or some of the allegations that we're seeing in the lawsuits. Nothing to suggest that his sons committed any of these crimes, or alleged crimes, I should say. I want to go to you, Elizabeth. We have a question from Susie Payne on YouTube. Will Diddy take the stand, and when will we see the court case? Well, presumably we would see it May 2025. We're not going to actually see it because no cameras, but presumably that's when it would start. Will Diddy take the stand?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly his right to do that. I think that his defense team would be pretty worried about that because then again, he's going to be subject to cross-examination, and I think these years will go extremely hard, show him all sorts of evidence, including the video and all sorts of probing questions. So yeah, I mean, this is a criminal case. This is not a civil lawsuit. So
he took the stand in the 1999 nightclub shooting case, worked for him there, but kind of a different case here. Okay, so we have an update from court. The judge asks Mr. Agnifilo, this is Sean Combs' lawyer, Mr. Agnifilo. Mr. Agnifilo responds, I'm going to have Ms. Shapiro lead us off. This is the other defense counsel. And she responds, he was not dragging her back to the freak-off. The judge says, there was dragging. Shapiro says, I don't mean to. Judge says, there was kicking. And then Shapiro says, he has apologized. Your thoughts about what the judge is getting to here?
yeah, I mean, one of the things that Diddy had said when Cassandra Ventura lawsuit, immediately obviously denied it and said this was an extortion attempt. She was just trying to pull money out of me. Once the video surfaced, he was sort of backed into a corner into apologizing. So I think what the prosecution's truly trying to get at is this is someone who will deny until he's backed into a corner. And I think what the judge is trying to pull is what are the potential reasons he admitted to it and apologized to it. Personally, I believe because he had no other choice.
Got a question from Alawani on YouTube. Will there be cameras for the trial at least? Nope, nope, and nope. Very disappointing. No cameras in federal courthouses, let alone in New York, except maybe in exceptional circumstances. But no, there's going to be no cameras in the trial. That's why we're doing our best right now to give you a sense of what's happening in that courthouse, providing you live updates. And of course, Elizabeth Milner from Law and Crime in that courtroom. She will come out to us, explain what she saw and heard. We have another update from court. The Judge Subramanian, says, what about the 2018 text messages with victim one about violence? And we believe that victim one is possibly Cassandra Ventura. Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, responds, we have gathered more information about victim one, even yesterday. I don't want to quote it because it's under seal and should be. It was consensual. Okay. So going back to what I mentioned before, Nima, what's today, the 22nd? They filed this yesterday, the 21st. I, again, think that the defense's letter to the judge about this 20-minute video under seal, so what are they trying to say? That everything that happened between him and, if we presume victim one is Cassandra Ventura, was consensual, and therefore that used by the prosecution as evidence that he is a danger to the public?
Well, Jesse, victim one does appear to be Cassie Ventura, and I want to raise an important point that just happened there in court. And something look, defense lawyers do, they have to advocate for their clients, but I think it's shameful. You saw that Agnifilo didn't defend Diddy when it came to violence against a woman, so they put a female defense lawyer to do that. So that's pretty common in these types of cases. That's why Shapiro started speaking. But we're talking about text messages from Cassie to Diddy. And again, going back to her lawsuit, and I believe her, she said that she was forced to have sex with male prostitutes while Diddy watched, videotaped, and masturbated. So I believe what she's saying, and there's text messages that corroborate her accounts of what happened. She has said to Diddy that I'm a human being, I'm someone's daughter, you beat me, you kicked me. That's all in text. I don't think the defense can deny that.
Oh yeah, that was provided by the prosecution as examples of what was happening, and then also he allegedly threatened to. This is what the prosecution says. Exposed videos of the freak-offs if she didn't do what he wanted. Now you're hearing the response from the defense. I've got a question from Ashley Glass on YouTube. Will the Law and Crime Channel be covering the case when and if it happens next year? We will do our best, given the circumstances of no cameras in that courtroom. So again, Elizabeth, this is a really interesting back and forth. Is there a possibility the judge will not make a decision today, or after hearing the arguments from both sides, in briefs and today, I mean, it seems probably more likely than not we are going to get a decision on Diddy's bail.
I'd be really surprised if there wasn't a decision. I believe the two prior judges were decisions pretty quickly. And again, this is a case where time is of the essence. I think both prosecution and defense are going to want to push for a decision quickly for their own reasons. So I'd be very surprised if there wasn't a decision. And federal judges are prone to act faster than state judges.
Nima, I'm going to you. Judge, update from court. Judge Subramanian asks, I don't want to quote from them, but you know the ones I mean. Again, it seems to be this information under seal. And Mark Agnifilo says, we are proposing an independent security firm. There has been mutually regrettable physical conduct going both ways. There was violence by this other person and by Mr. Combs allegedly. You're also getting a preview, I think, Nima, of some of the defense strategy when this goes to trial.
Pretty shameful victim shaming here to allege that Cassie Ventura was the instigator or violence when we saw just brutality there, right? Dragged by her feet, kicked, the vase being thrown at her. Terrible, terrible stuff being said by the defense. But again, their job is to represent their clients, so that's what they're going to do. But to attack Cassie Ventura and say that she was the violent one or the instigator, pretty shameful in my opinion. It's
always a tricky kind of avenue, especially if you cross-examine Cassandra Ventura, how you paint your victim or alleged victim. It's tough in these sexual assault cases, but unfortunately, you have his life on the line. This is what you might have to do. Whether or not it would turn off a jury or judge, we'll have to see. Comment from Angela Maria. Jesse is devastated about no cameras. You're right. I am devastated. I have no shame in saying that whatsoever. Talk to me about, it's funny. Elizabeth, talk to me about the idea here. What would happen if on bail, a pretrial release, and then he ends up doing, what the prosecution says he does? He reaches out to witnesses again. He reaches out to victims. I mean, I imagine his bail will be revoked, but does that put the judge in kind of a bad position?
I would imagine it would. Again, the judge is guided by two prior judges saying this is too much of a risk. We can't let this person out on bail. And if the judge takes a chance and says, let's try home confinement, and then that happens, I think that would be devastating. And that would also really affect the potential outcome of the trial. Again, a big part of the indictment focused on the element of control and power that he had. So if Diddy is able to exert that same level of control and power over witnesses to try to block potential testimony, that could be devastating for the case.
And by the way, tell me if I'm totally crazy here, Nima, but his team was pushing for a trial to happen as soon as possible, presumably because he doesn't want to be, in jail for the next 2 or 3 years. Risk it, go to trial. They might think they have a good defense, but if he's granted bail today, are we going to see a motion tomorrow, Monday? Let's postpone the trial. Hey, I'd like to be on home confinement for as long as possible before going to trial. Am I crazy to think that, Nima?
You're not crazy at all, Jesse, and I think the major motivating factor to push this case to trial so quickly is the fact that Diddy is in custody. And frankly, one of the reasons that people on the defense bar, they don't like their clients being in custody is not just preparing for trial, but oftentimes defendants will want to plead just to get the whole thing over with. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in this case because there's so much time, but you're absolutely right. I can see this case being designated as complex, being kicked out a year or even longer if Diddy is surprisingly released.
And we have another update from court where it seems, I would say, Elizabeth, the defense is not necessarily denying that he's had communications, but they're saying you have to read what these communications are, because they just said Sean Combs' lawyer, Ms. Shapiro. In the LaFontaine case from 2000, the defendant told someone to lie by phone from the MCC. This was another federal prison. This is actually where Jeffrey Epstein died. But it says, in the Gotti case from 1996, the head of the Gambino crime family, the witness received a kick in the ass. The government does not have that here. So they're trying to distinguish maybe what Sean Combs said. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the defense is going to try to push. They're going to say, you know, he's entitled to work on his defense while he's in prison. There was no sort of attempt to obstruct justice or try to sway people. Obviously, that's what they're going to claim. I think it all depends on what's in those notes, which we're not going to know about for weeks on end, and what evidence the prosecution has in terms of what did he say. You know, they're saying that they have intercepted recorded calls of him trying to instruct witnesses about what to say. So, you know, I think it's a tough one.
All right, Nima, I want to get another question from you before I have to sign both of you off. We have two new guests that are coming in a minute. We'll take a quick break, but before we do, Nima, this is a question from Ivy D on YouTube. What is the prosecution's counter-argument against it being consensual behavior?
Well, it's going to be the testimony of the witnesses, right? They got to show that force, fraud, or coercion. That's what separates consensual sexual activity between adults. It can be as freaky as the participants want, as long as it's consensual. So they need the testimony of the witnesses. But also, let's not forget, there's a lot of video evidence here, right? Diddy recorded these videos allegedly for his own sexual gratification, but also to maintain control over the victims. But I really think the game changer in this case, Jesse, is if there's a superseding indictment alleging the sex trafficking of minors. That takes consent out the window.
That changes the whole game. All right, so we're going to take a break. We're going to continue covering these updates from what's happening in that courtroom. Sean Combs' bail day. We'll see if Judge Subramanian is more receptive to these arguments. Will he grant Sean Combs bail? Wait and see. But Elizabeth Vulai, Nima Rahmani, so much for coming on. Take a quick break. I'll be right back after this, and we're going to bring Owen and Brian McMonigal, celebrity attorneys to the celebrities. We'll be back in a second.
So what y'all think? With what we've just listened to, what are y'all's opinions? I don't like that.
Get that off of that.
Well, celebrities are no different than us hoes. You lure children to do nasty things to them. You're gonna eventually pay the price. Yeah, I don't believe he'll get out. If he does, it'll be a huge shock. I mean, like Bob told us earlier, he's already been denied bail 3 times. What makes him think he's going to get it on this 4th try? Y'all be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me, please. God. Girl, did I mod you yesterday? Well, they've been keeping him in the shoe, so like no one else can really get to him at the moment. But I feel like they were to put that sick SOB in General Pop. Just my opinion, though. It's not gray anymore. I've been waiting to see you so I could mod you. And you get a big kid mod status. No, I have the video muted at the moment because they're just standing outside the courthouse. Yeah, Squitter. Can you hear me? I know there's no sound on the video. They're just standing outside the courthouse. Hello? Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me? Hello? Haha, Tim. Okay, see, someone kept saying no sound. I knew the video that I was showing didn't have sound. I don't feel like hearing sirens in my ear. Yep. What are you doing, chocolate face? Did you really just spit on my phone? At least you're tiny sleeping. What I'd give for him to take a nap. Okay, hold on.
Live look of the federal courthouse in downtown New York, where the issue of Sean Combs' bail is being discussed. Now, of course, as we know, that has been denied multiple times by other judges, but this is the first time the current judge overseeing this case, Judge Arun Subramanian, is actually deciding this issue. And we're seeing back and forths between the prosecution and the defense on this. I say seeing, there are no cameras in that courtroom. Our very own Elizabeth Milner is inside that courtroom. She's going to come out a little bit later, tell us what she saw, what she heard. But what we are doing right now is providing you live, real-time updates about what is happening in that courtroom. There is reporting coming back, so I want to get into it right now. Really interesting about what's happening. Let me bring in criminal defense attorneys Brian McMonigal and Bradford Cohen, attorneys to the stars. Great to have you, gentlemen. So let me tell you about what is happening right now. So Sean Combs' attorney, Alexandra Shapiro, is having a back and forth with Judge Subramanian. I'm going to read everybody the back and forth. So first, defense attorney Shapiro says, we cited the Trump case. Defendants have greater rights to speak than their lawyers. An Instagram post, as well as I don't know if I can, and then the judge says his communications from the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center. Shapiro says he says the prosecution is motivated by racism. So let me just be clear about this. There's a conversation, there's a discussion about what was he saying, maybe on telephone calls to other people while he's been locked up at the MDC. The other question is, was he orchestrating a social media campaign using his family to post things online that might potentially, so keeping that in mind. Shapiro, again, Sean Combs' lawyer, says, this is covered by the First Amendment. Messages they point to are not instructions to lie. There is a barrage of negative media coverage. He has a right to respond to that. The judge asks, why not through counsel? Shapiro says, we're happy to do that. Shapiro says, but we're lawyers. It's not really what we do. Some of these recordings shows that he's telling people, just tell the truth, talk with my lawyer. And then the judge says, victim 3, you're saying the communications are fine? And Shapiro says, yes, same on witness 1 and witness 2. The judge says, what about the communications that are missing? Agnifilo, this is Mark Agnifilo, this is Sean Combs' other lawyer, says, witness 1 reached out to Mr. Combs' counsel and asked us for a lawyer. We didn't do anything along those lines because it was, I don't know the factual answer. Judge responded, how do you not know? How do you know? Or how do you not know, maybe? Oh, it's how did you not know? That's exactly. How did you not know? And Sean Combs' other lawyer, Tenny Garrigo, says, there was a message from Mr. Combs to witness 1. I'll like to give it to you under seal. Prosecutor Foster may know it does not give rise to the level of obstruction. I do not have the actual message. Brian, I'll start with you. A lot of back and forth here. It's about whether or not his communications are a form of obstruction. It's about whether or not him even initiating a social media campaign would be to improperly influence a jury. This all goes to the issue, is he a danger on the outside? Is he flouting the rules inside? He cannot be released outside. What are you taking away from back and forth I went through?
Well, the fact that they're debating it is healthy for him. It sounds like our judge here is trying to give a real fair analysis to all this. And this is a collision between First Amendment rights, as far as I'm concerned, and some of the requirements under bail, if there should be bail given. You're not supposed to have contact with witnesses. You're certainly not supposed to intimidate witnesses, but you're also able to defend yourself and marshal a defense and speak your mind as a defendant. And judges always have a very difficult time trying to balance those two constitutional issues. And I think this judge is struggling with it because this is a man who's on trial for his life. His liberty's been taken away from him. And that would be something that one would expect of someone who's been accused of heinous crimes. So I think that today is probably, as I think you've described it, really the first opportunity for there to be a healthy debate on why he should be released.
And Bradford, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that as well. I do want to let you know there was another update where Ms. Garagos, who again is one of Sean Combs' attorneys, says, my client obeys me. For example, on victim 3, he stopped using ASAP and other phone lines. The messages with witness 1 were pre-arrest. He obeys us. He came to New York. In the Bureau of Prisons, when I tell him not to do something, he does it. So in other words, if you have concerns about him flouting the rules, he will listen to us. We'll tell him what to do.
I think that's an argument that I've often made, and I think a lot of defense attorneys make in terms of that our clients will listen to us if we tell them what to do and what not to do. And in certain circumstances, you have clients that have not been in a situation like this before, where they're in custody, where they are getting a barrage of allegations against them. Some may have some basis of truth and some may not. And you've seen that over and over again in this case. There have been reports of different things that went on and different allegations against Sean Combs that they have then found out these are just rumors and they're not true. I think that it's not a bad thing when a PR company or even when a defendant takes it on himself to have family members talk about the good thing that he's done in the past and the charitable things that they've done in the past. When you have a case like this where they are just every day there's something that is coming out, something that is leaked by either the government or a party that's involved or someone that's interested in the case, where it is affecting, that could have affected a jury. I think that, that release of that Cassie tape, and I keep going back to that release of that Cassie tape, I think the tape was released because they knew that she was going to be somewhat blamed for the behavior that happened, that they would know that she would participate in these different things with different individuals, and they wanted to make sure that was cut off at the pass and essentially make her a victim and not a co-defendant. And I think that's why that tape was eventually leaked by whatever party that leaked that tape. A lot of not going back to that. No one's really discussed how that tape has come out, and I think it's an interesting thing. And especially when you have a judge that's interested in your story, and you have a prosecution that is interested in why he is making these, these PR moves on social media. I think it all comes back to that tape, and I think that's their strongest, quote unquote, strongest piece of evidence in terms of their star witness to say, hey, this guy's a bad guy.
Hang on. What the hell is a prison inmate or jail inmate doing on social media, doing his own PR any damn way? Rich or not. He, as the defense attorney, should be the one doing the PR. Oh, I agree, Squid. He definitely has dirt on the others. It's a bullshit. That's what it is. It's absolute bullshit.
I do like the fact, and I will agree with Brian, that the fact that they're having a conversation, that the judge is engaging them, is always a good sign. Is it, the end all be all that he's going to grant him bond? I don't know. I think this is a tough hill to take. I think it's an uphill battle whenever you have an individual that's facing the type of time that they're facing and the type of allegations to get a bond. Certainly, the bond package is pretty extensive in my opinion. A $50 million bond is nothing to sneeze about.
And to go into that, about one of the areas where I think Judge Subramanian seems to be receptive. He actually told prosecutors early this week, be prepared to talk about this. It's coming up right now, and Brian, I'll this. So this Ms. Shapiro, who's Sean Combs' lawyer, says, I submit the charges in the Jeffries Abercrombie case are worse than here. They allege an international sex trafficking business. They were raped and forced to engage, and I'm not going to say, but in a certain kind of sex acts. And by the way, the argument here is, and this is what the Judge Subramanian said, is distinguish prosecution why it is Sean Combs, after putting forward a bail package, as we said, $50 million, 24/7 private security firm, limited visitors, visitor logs, no internet use, no phone use, why is he denied bond when you have Mike Jeffries, the former head of Abercrombie & Fitch, who was just arrested and charged with sex trafficking? Why is he out on $10 million bail? And by the way, the prosecution responded earlier, and they had a back and forth about this. He's 80 years old. Sean Combs is 55 years old. Sean Combs is charged with racketeering. He's not charged with racketeering. Sean Combs has alleged instances of prior violent behavior, not the instance with Mike Jeffries. But here you're seeing, Brian, where they're saying, we actually think the Jeffries case is worse. What do you make of that?
Well, it's brilliant. And I think that's the road they have to travel because it's precedent. You're not supposed to have different rulings for like-minded cases. Disparity in treatment is always frowned upon in the federal courts. And here they have a significant public interest case where bail was set at $10 million by agreement. It wasn't debated over. The government agreed to it. Now we come over to Sean Puffy Combs' case, and they're objecting to for some who I don't believe has ever been convicted of federal crime or a felony. I could be wrong about that. And they're putting restraints in place that make the previous bail package pale in comparison. So they're right to make this argument. It's precedent. It's precedent within that jurisdiction. And I think the judge is going to look hard at it. You've now got two rulings that have gone against him. So he's got to look at those rulings and those judges. But he's also got a situation where the government has agreed to bail in a situation that's, if it's not as bad, it's pretty darn close by accusation.
And look, I think they could, look, it's also a different court. This is a different, this is the Southern District of New York. That was the Eastern District of New York. But even you put that difference aside, this seems to be one of the more compelling arguments put forward by the defense. Bradford, we're also taking questions, by the way. So anybody who has questions about this case, submit them on YouTube. If you have questions about the hearing, submit them. We have this interesting question from Sahara Useri on YouTube. Why did Combs get a new judge to begin with? It's interesting, right? Because I believe we had a district court judge or a magistrate judge, then a district court judge, now Judge Arun Subramanian. Why do you see a reassignment of a case like this? Why is it now in the hands of Judge Arun Subramanian? Why do you see this happen, Bradford?
Well, on federal cases, we always appear to begin with in front of a magistrate. That's usually the person who hears the case, if it's a bond issue, and or if it's even a preliminary issue. A lot of times, court judges will give magistrates the power to rule over different kind of motions to suppress and motions to dismiss. But we always go in front of a magistrate that's associated with the judge, and then generally you then go to the judge that's going to have your case. It just depends. Sometimes you go to a temporary judge until it gets assigned. A lot of times judges don't have time for the type of case that it is, or they might not have the schedule that will behoove a trial in a certain period of time. I believe that this trial is being set for April, and it might be the other judge that was assigned already has a case that's set for April. That's not uncommon. I don't see that as like unusual. That in many cases, I've had many cases where judges have changed at the beginning of the case. It's usually unlikely that at the end of the case that you have a judge that'll change once they've heard motions and once you've done discovery and things of that nature. But I don't find anything of that unusual. Magistrates are always common. You always go in front of a magistrate first, and those are usually randomly assigned. And then a judge is randomly assigned, and then another judge can take over at any time. It's not that big of a deal.
And by the way, I wish we had cameras in the courtroom, but based purely on the arguments that we're seeing and have seen with Judge Subramanian, I feel confident to say this feels like a very fair, well-reasoned judge. The way he was pressing the prosecution, the way he's been pressing the defense, it's really something to take note of. And that's kind of the judge that's exactly the kind of judge you want in these cases. There's a question that we have from Samian on YouTube. I'm curious, Jesse, why did the prosecutor not reference the R. Kelly trial? They might not have referenced it today, but it was in their filings. I think it was even in the very first bail filing. They referenced the R. Kelly case. They referenced the Jeffrey Epstein cases as why it would justify bail for Sean Combs. Here's another question. I'll throw this over to you, Brian, from Europees Hunar on YouTube. If Diddy gets out of bail, does that mean that he gets out immediately, like this hour?
It'll happen pretty quickly. He'll have to go back. Usually you have to go back to the detention center that you're being housed in. There's some paperwork that has to be done, but I would think it would happen pretty quickly. It would be tonight. Unless there's some other snafu that occurs in trying to get it done. But for a high-profile case like this, they'll move quickly on it. All the eyes of the world are watching it. I think it'll happen pretty quickly. It'll certainly happen, I think, sometime tonight, if he rules tonight. I mean, that's, some judges recognizing that there could be an appeal of this ruling will take the time to issue a written opinion. And that would be the only reason I would think this judge would hesitate before ruling in this case. He seems, as you've described it, to be a really fair-minded and thoughtful guy. That is his reputation. And some of those judges that are more thoughtful and more fair-minded issue written opinions, which he may do in this case.
We have another update from court. Ms. Shapiro, again, defense counsel for Sean Combs. While in Jeffrey's case, one defendant is 80 and the other is 71, Mr. Combs is 55. I hate to say it, It's not that young, because that was one of the things the prosecution said. Like, you're
Objection.
dealing with an 80-year-old. Yeah, you're dealing with an 80-year-old. You're dealing with an 80-year-old. He's 55. You know, he's much younger. He's more of a danger. The judge says the U.S. suggests he won't follow conditions. Shapiro says these conditions are more restrictive than in the prison. Again, I kind of laid out what some of the conditions are. Bradford, your thoughts?
I think the argument that one guy's 80 and one guy's 55 is, if I was a judge, I think that would fall on deaf ears. The 80-year-old might be more willing to do something crazy because he's 80. You know, it's like he only has so much time left. Anytime you give an 80-year-old is going to be a life sentence. So if the guy gets 5 years and he's 85 years old, that's not that young. So it's the argument itself is not great about the age. I think the stronger argument is maybe that in the RICO charges, they're charging some sort of violent behavior. That's probably a stronger argument because the Abercrombie and Fitch CEO doesn't have a history of alleged violence or participation in violence. But the allegations of the sex trafficking are very, very, in my opinion, are worse for the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch. And it's just, you know, it's funny that it just by happenstance, these cases happen together. If it didn't happen together, you'd have nothing to compare it to. You'd have to go back to a different sex trafficking case that someone didn't get bond. So it just so happened that this worked out for Sean Combs, where the Eastern District comes to an agreement on the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, and it works in his favor. I think that you have to lean very heavily on this guy could make a run for it at any time, right? It's not just that he's a danger, it's also that he's a flight risk, they were arguing. He could have made a run for it at any time. He has jets, he could have gone to Mexico, he could have gone anywhere, and he never did. He surrendered when he was supposed to surrender. In fact, they didn't even allow him to surrender. They picked him up at night at a hotel when they knew that they could have called him and he would have just surrendered in the morning. I think that it goes to show a lot of bias, obviously, on behalf of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I think a judge like this judge, who used to be a clerk for really, really good judges and was in the commercial business world and kind of looks at things that looks at objectivity that way, I think was a real, real good thing for Sean Combs here, because a lot of other judges that have been kind of jaded by the criminal system might not give him as fair of a shake as this judge is. And this judge is fairly new to the bench, so I think that benefits Sean Combs as well.
It's interesting you say that, because I want to read you the latest from court right now. So the judge says, Mr. Agnifilo, where is the home he'd be in? So again, if you're talking about home confinement, Agnifilo says, I don't want to give the address, but it's on Star Island. There's a causeway. This is in Florida. This is Miami. There's a dock, but there would be no boat. The judge responds, that's not going to work. We're in New York. Agnifilo says, give me a moment. He comes back. There is an apartment on the Upper East Side. We have one available, 3 bedrooms. The judge says, where are the 24/7 security going to be? Agnifilo says, would you like to speak to him or me? It's Patriot Security. They merged with Crisis 24. So, Brian, now, is this just the judge doing his full due diligence about understanding what bail would look like? Or is this kind of potentially a sign of where he might be going? And by the way, we have another update. He says, Agnifilo says there'd be 2 security guards in the apartment and 1 downstairs, so a total of 3. No access to phones or the internet except for calls with counsel arranged by the security personnel. This is more restrictive than in the MDC. Brian.
I think he's leaning toward letting them out. The response to the judge, by the way, about jurisdiction is crucial. Most courts, no matter where you are, if they're going to release you, they're going to release you to that district. And so I was kind of surprised that the bail package didn't originally provide for that, because no one's going to let him go to Florida. But I think this judge is giving real serious consideration to letting him out. Think about it. All the headaches go away. We don't got to worry about the FDC. We don't got to worry about what's happening at the FDC. We don't have to worry about counsel complaining about the fact for the next 9 months that they don't have true access to discovery, that the defendant doesn't get discovery, that the defendant doesn't have the opportunity to defend himself with counsel. All those issues go away for you as a judge. He's not running anywhere. And if they're right, and he's foolish enough to engage in threatening behavior while he's out on bail, that will be the first piece of evidence they introduce at his trial. So I think the judge is a pretty smart guy, and I think he well realizes that the original bail package probably should have been something that they gave serious consideration to. You know, he's presumed innocent. You know, the presumption of innocence all of a sudden fades away when we talk about celebrities. But he's presumed innocent in this case, and bail is for people that are presumed innocent, and he is.
And for the prosecution's point of view, you know, in one hand, if he is let out, engages in obstruction, they can not only have the bond revoked, but gives them more evidence for potentially a superseding indictment, more evidence for at a trial. But the downside is they don't want to be in a position where witnesses are threatened or intimidated and don't cooperate with the government. So it's kind of a tricky situation here. We have an update here. Bradford, I'll go to you. Ignifilo says, Mr. Combs would avoid all contact with anyone who may be a witness. I think he has a right to do that, but I want to make it as easy for the court as possible. We are going to investigate thoroughly before the May 5th trial. He has a right to assist. Your thoughts?
I think that, like I said before, I think that, you know, every argument that they're making is falling on ears that are open instead of deaf ears. Whenever you're a defense attorney, and Brian knows this as well as I do, and you're representing a high-profile individual, sometimes there are preconceived notions, and the judge has kind of already made up their mind while you're arguing, and you can see it in their face. They might give you a you know, what seems to be a fair shake, but ultimately they have made up their mind. In this case, as the argument is progressing and his attorneys are adding on to bail pack that he's not going to phones, and a lot of times clients, high-profile clients, or state court, I offer 24-hour security. I usually hire ex FBI, ex DEA, you know, and I'm sure the company that he has is probably along those same lines that give credibility to the security that's going to be watching him and you know, making sure who's checking in and who's signing out and things of that nature. All those things add up in a judge's mind to assure them that they're doing everything possible to kind of stay out of the way and not get in trouble. I honestly do think, listening to what's going on, the judge is giving serious consideration to allowing him out on bond, which to me is a surprise because a lot of times in federal court, you don't get that fair shake. You know, when you have these allegations and you're representing someone who's high profile, a lot of times these judges have made up their minds. I mean, we want to feel like every judge is fair. We want to feel that the judicial system is fair, but a lot of times that the judges have already made up their minds, and it's very difficult to get a bond on this case. And I think that his defense attorneys are doing an excellent job in putting together this bail package and explaining it to the judge and coming up on, and often you find yourself doing this, coming up on the fly where the judge says, hey, that's not going to work. Florida's not going to work. I need something else. And it's like, yeah, I got an apartment on, you know, the Upper East Side. It's a 3-bedroom apartment. We're going to put them in. That's not easy to do. And it is a hats off to his defense for coming up with those things on the fly and being able to modify their argument that way. And I honestly think when a judge starts asking questions like that, he's very strongly leaning towards granting a bond.
Well, it's good when you're a multimillionaire. You could just, where am I? Where's this case happening? Yeah, I got a property around the corner. Let me ask you this. So this was brought out by the prosecutors earlier on, where they said, okay, want to talk about the security team? So they say, because the judge asked, you know, what are we talking about? They said, what type of security team? He's suggesting a co-conspirator, one whose phone was taken only the day before. The second suggestion, was a defense investigator in this case. That investigator has been out contacting witnesses. Essentially, they work for him. So the reason I bring that up is because the judge just said the government is saying Mr. Combs would be paying these people. It comes down to trust. Mark Agnifilo, again, Sean Combs' defense counsel, says it's a different relationship. There are professionals that are only be in his life for 8 months. It's a high-profile case. He goes on to say he's been in jail 66 days without a laptop. He only got one a few hours ago. What is unique here is to have waited 9 weeks to get a laptop into the MDC. The judge says the solution is for you to come to me. We can call these hearings, which get things done. Okay, so that's a separate issue about what the resources he has. The question, of course, Brian, is can you trust the security team? Prosecutors say, A, they have the connections to him, but B, even if they didn't, he has a way to compromise people. If he's in prison, if he's in jail right now at the MDC and he's using inmates' PAC numbers to make phone calls, that's the question. Can we trust the security team? What do you make of that?
As my brilliant colleague just pointed out, the way to go would be to make sure that you've explained to the court that you've got a team that is beyond reproach. And I'd be a little stunned if that's not the case. They should have former FBI, former New York police, somebody that when the judge hears their bona fides, he's going to say, you know what, this is somebody who's got some intellectual honesty. This is somebody who's not going to risk their reputation for a payday. And so I would expect that if the judge does release him, he's going to want to see that. He's not going to want just somebody on this guy's payroll to be overseeing him, during these 9 months. I can assure you. So I'm surprised if that's not the case.
Right.
And knowing Mark as I do, who's a preeminent lawyer, they'll make sure it is the case. If they've already provided a team, they'll get a better team. If that's an issue with the judge.
Let me ask you this, Brian.
Jesse.
I'll ask you both this because this is a question that we got from one of our YouTubers, Floss Daily. Who pays the security company? If Diddy's paying it, is that a conflict? I'll allow either one of you to address that. If Bradford, you want to address that?
Yeah. Sure, yeah, because I was going to add in, it's an absolutely great question. And what I do is to kind of take out the stench of any kind of impropriety that you think could go on. I figure out, okay, if it's 24-hour security for 8 months, it's going to be $250,000, $350,000, whatever it's going to be. And I instruct my client that we put that money in my trust account and that or a company is hired to pay them separately from just the defendant. So they're not really on the defendant to get a paycheck. It kind of takes that sting out. I mean, there's always going to be a sting of, hey, I'll give you an extra $1,000 if you do X, Y, Z. You can never kind of get rid of that that kind of thing, but you can take out one of the links in the chain and say they're going to be getting their paycheck from either ADP or they're going to get the paycheck from my law firm, but they're not going to be relying on the defendant to get paid, and they can't be threatened like, hey, you're not getting a paycheck unless you let me use your phone. A lot of times that also helps in these situations where a judge is asking about, how is this going to work with this 24-hour security, and they're behooving to him because he's the one who's paying it. I think it takes out one of those links, and it also benefits the court's decision. It eases their mind on that issue.
Brian, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that, but we also have another update from court. Mark Agnifilo says, I have a whole presentation ready about the tape, but if you've got enough, I can save everyone 15 minutes. The judge says, I have reviewed it. Who is here from pretrial services? Pretrial services comes forward and says, we maintain conditions are insufficient. The judge says, have there been other cases with private guards? Pretrial services says, not that I'm aware. What do you think, Brian?
Happens all the time. Pretrial services, they do a great job, but they're a government case like this. The default position always for pretrial is going to be detain. It's easier for them to do that. This judge knows that. One of the other things that came to mind while I was listening to Bradford was, I wonder if the government didn't do themselves a disservice by this untimely search of the cell.
Yeah.
Where they shook his cell down. They allegedly looked at privileged materials. That's a no-no. And I don't think this judge was all too pleased with it. And I think he started doing the math in this case and started thinking to himself, it may be easier for everybody, including the government and the prison officials, if we let this guy pay a lot of money for a private security firm from fleeing, and with this case tried in a timely fashion. I won't be running into court every week or two with a complaint about discovery. He didn't get his computer. We've got so many terabytes to go over. We don't have the ability to defend. It puts so many issues into a case that can be easily resolved with agreeing to the bail package. So it was just another thought.
And
Yeah, Brian's
Bradford,
100%
yeah,
correct.
Bradford, jump in on that. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 100% correct. So first of all, there's been cases in New York. I've had cases in New York where we've recommended private security and got granted private security. And around the country, when you look at these high profile cases, there's been many, many cases where private security. One of them is NBA YoungBoy, who had a case in Louisiana. He had private security as part of his bail package in Utah. Kodak, who I represented, he had a private security as part of his bail package. It's happened many, many times. And I think the number one takeaway that Brian is so right on is that this searching of his jail cell was so very stupid by the government, and they just can't help themselves. Like it's really sometimes, they can't help themselves. Even when they have cases that they feel are good, they want more.
Well, just to be fair, they said this sweep of the MDC was it was comprehensive. It wasn't just aimed at Sean Combs. His defense is it was a pretext, but just their argument.
Yeah, I have a very cheap bridge for sale for you. Listen, I think that this was I think it was a pre-target. I find it very hard to believe that it wasn't. You had a specialist that was there that normally is not there. He's taking pictures of items that have nothing to do with what they're searching for, phones and drugs and things of that nature. I find that very hard to believe, and it just is shocking sometimes when you look at the government when they have so much power. They have so many assets that they can use to obtain guilty verdicts, and they want more. They always want more. And in this case, I think this bit them in the behind. I think that the only reason this judge is being so not I don't want the only reason that this judge has considered some of these arguments, I think, and they're not falling on deaf ears, is partly because of the prosecution's dream that this was just this was something that was going to happen, and we didn't mean to get his notes, and even though we had his notes, we had a team, we put up a Chinese wall. They have every excuse in the book, but once you taint a case with something like that, it's very hard to regain a judge's trust. And I think that's why a lot of these questions are being asked of the prosecution. And in addition to this guy who got out, the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, I just think a lot of things came together for Sean Combs to give him this opportunity, and this is his best shot.
So we have another update from court where the prosecutor has now jumped in and said, consider witness one a participant in multiple freak-offs. Defendant continued to contact witness one after counsel was retained. The Instagram post was planned for a week using Contact Me ASAP and other inmates' codes. Really, really interesting there about that, basically suggesting that Sean Combs is engaging in obstruction. I wanted to ask you, we have a question from one of our viewers that I think is fascinating. And Brian, I'll throw it to you. Are there any additional bail conditions the judge could impose on Sean Combs? Could the judge place Sean Combs under the supervision of the Federal Probation Office?
I have never seen that being done. I mean, anything that probation office could do would pale in comparison to what the defense has already submitted. You put somebody on a bracelet. I mean, they don't have the resources to have 24/7 guards in the U.S. Probation Department. More importantly, that's not their role. So, fair question. Why not have the feds protect him and police him while he's out? It's not the way the system works. And more importantly, I think to all of this is, there has to be an ability for somebody to defend themselves. And what the prosecuting team seems to be relying on here is his efforts to really defend himself. He is looking for help. He is looking to try to line up witnesses, marshal a defense, to reach out to allies, to get friends and family to get on social media so he can start not winning the battle, but just try and making the landscape a little bit easier and more even. And so I don't know what this judge is going to do. But I would tell you, constitutionally and legally, the easy thing to do would be to allow this bail package to be put in place. And the worst thing that could happen for the defendant would be if he spit in the face of the court once the court gave this to him.
Yeah. And by the way, that brings me to another point. So, Bradford, we have an update from court. The question becomes what he was allegedly doing while at the MDC. We can have a back and forth about whether or not he was actually engaging in obstruction and what the contents were, versus was he violating the Bureau of Prison rules. If they tell him not to make a phone call or they tell him not to do this, whatever the contents of it were, if he violates the rules, the idea is he violates the rules of the Bureau of Prison. What makes you think he won't violate the rules of his bail? The reason I say that is because the prosecutor said his family member said the lawyers say not to do it, and the defendant responds, "I don't care, it's my birthday." This is in regards, presumably, to that whole social media campaign about surrounding his birthday and the birthday video. So the idea would be he just didn't care, he violated the BOP rules. The judge said, Ms. Shapiro said sharing codes is common with other inmates, and the conduct was covered by the First Amendment. The prosecutor says, the Bureau of Prisons handbook prohibits this. So it becomes a question, the content of what he was doing, Bradford, versus did he just straight up break the rules? And if rules, is that a concern for why he shouldn't be granted bail?
So the rules that he broke are broken on the daily basis. Like it's so idiotic when they just overshoot every time and say like, oh, it's three-way calling. He broke the rules. I don't even know how many times. I'm sure Brian has been through the same thing. I don't know how many times our clients call us with three-way calls and using someone else's PIN. And it's not that they want to discuss anything. It's all attorney-client privilege when they call us, unless it's a three-way call and there's someone else on the line, then it's not. And I always let my clients know that. But a lot of times they'll use other people's PINs for different reasons. Like even when they call me from a different PIN, it's because they feel like the government on a discussion between them and their lawyer, and they could be right. It's not like they're wrong. And a lot of times, or they want to call, they're married and they want to call their girlfriend. So they use, one of the other guy's PIN numbers. It's so commonly done that I don't even consider it a flagrant violation of the rules. I don't even know if they give shots, and what a shot is they give them some sort of a warning or some sort of pink slip for using someone else's. I don't even know if they do that anymore because they're more concerned with the drugs and the cell phones and things that are snuck into the jail. This is such a minor violation that the government here is saying is such a massive violation that unless they can really tie it up, doing it to contact these witnesses and threatening witnesses, if the judge has real life experience, which I'm sure this judge does, he's going to look at that as a very minor violation of the jail rules. And I don't think that shows that he's going to flagrantly do things if he's let out. I just don't think that's a good argument.
Well, here's the question. This is a question from Jasmine Milan on YouTube. I'll throw it to you, Brian. Couldn't he just have his family members do all the things that he isn't allowed to do? That would be the question in terms of if he's out.
If he's out. Yeah, I mean, I think we end up chasing our tails with some of the issues here. I mean, if he's out, he's going to do everything he can to defend himself. If he's in, he's going to do everything he can to defend himself. If he's in, he's got to jump through all these hoops to have contact with the people that are going to do everything they can for him to defend himself. Remove the hoops. Bradford's got it right. I think I got 4 three-way calls during this session, for God's sake. It's happening. There were probably 20 of them from this detention center while this was happening. It happens every day, and it goes back to that central thing that I keep thinking. This judge seems like a really brilliant guy. The headaches here are all driven by the fact that they've taken away his liberty before his trial. Right. All those headaches, every single one of them, put aside for the sake of argument the government's concern about threat, every one of those headaches that inure to the defendant in terms of constitutional protections go away.
Yeah.
All of the headaches for the court in policing this go away. They become somebody else's problem and know well that if there's one issue, somebody goes sideways a little bit, somebody makes a phone call somewhere,
Right.
he's detained within 5 minutes of that incident. So
Right.
the easy thing to do here, and I've been kind of,
Yeah,
saying this for a month, is to let a guy have a $50 million bail package.
I'm going to give you another question, Brian, because you know what? You're right. We've been beating the same kind of drum a little bit. I have another question for you from one of our viewers. Before I get to that, let me just give everybody an update about what's happening in court. Prosecutor says defendant has used at least 8 inmates' codes. He's bought them. The judge says they say contact me ASAP operates through TrueLinks, the trust fund limited. The prosecutor says it's not permitted. In the Jeffries case, one is detained, and the judge said that's a foreign national. Okay, so making a little distinctions here. But I do have a different question for you, Brian, if I can find it, if I didn't lose it. This is from Latoya on YouTube. If he is convicted, Brian, and sentenced to prison, what happens with the civil lawsuits?
Well, I mean, the civil lawsuits may all at some point be indefensible. Once he's convicted, I again, making sure all those civil lawsuits have some relationship to the charges here. To the extent they do, they become indefensible. There'll be a conviction. That conviction will be part and parcel of the evidence in the civil case. He'd have to be deposed. If he was deposed while his case is on appeal, he'd have to assert the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is an admission in a civil case. Those cases, if they are related to this event and he is convicted, become indefensible.
All right, we have another other update. Prosecutor says this is more similar to the cases where detention was ordered, talking about R. Kelly, Keith Raniere, Larry Ray. Bradford, if you're sitting in that courtroom and you're representing Sean Combs and the prosecution mentions these other people, R. Kelly was charged with sex trafficking and racketeering. How do you distinguish Sean Combs from those cases?
Well, the funny thing is, and it's not that funny, is that the different areas have different issues with bond and how bond packages are done. In the R. Kelly case, I don't think number one is they came up with $50 million. They didn't have 24-hour security. They didn't have electronic monitor taking away his cell phones, his computers, etc. They didn't have any of that. So if you want to compare apples to apples, I think, and my opinion, is that the best case scenario is that Abercrombie and Fitch CEO. I keep going back to it. It happened very soon in time. It was in an area that is right next to New York City, which is the Eastern District. He was allowed to surrender. He was given a $10 million bond. The guy still, nobody even knows. If I was in a room with the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, I wouldn't know him from anyone, right? If I'm in a room with Sean Combs, I'm going to recognize him right away. So it's a little bit of a different situation. The CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch can disappear to Morocco. No one's going to recognize the guy.
He's got. I mean, have you seen his face? He's got a quite a distinguishable face, but that's a separate kind of issue. But anyway, yeah.
I have. And the common man does not know who the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch is. I would argue that Sean Combs is known pretty much worldwide, especially even at this point, and that I think lends itself to really distinguishing him from the rest of these individuals. And we always say like, hey, money does that, and it's true. Someone without substance might not be getting a bond on this case, but that's the whole point of bond, is that it shows your commitment to appear in court, to not violate the rules, to do these certain things. So as you have more money, obviously the bond is higher in amount to make that more of a damaging thing. Like, someone worth 100 million, if I put up 50, that's really hurts me, right? It's just like if someone was $100 and they put up 50. So the thing is that that's the difference between Sean Combs and these other cases, is that his bond package is completely different than what was being offered in those other cases. And the fact, I can't get beyond the fact that he just stuck around. He didn't go anywhere. Not that he could have. I'm sure the feds had their eyes on him 24/7 before they filed charges. but he stuck around. He didn't go anywhere. He informed them of where he was flying, when he was flying, where he was going, when he was going during that whole period of time. And then when he knows that he's going to be arrested, he flies to New York in preparation. And instead of allowing him to surrender, like they would allow anyone, I mean, he's there to surrender. Instead of allowing him to surrender, which a judge would have looked upon that favorably and said, oh, he surrendered himself, they go to his hotel and they pick him up at 9 o'clock at night. It was a real, to me, spit in the face. And I think the reason they did that is because they knew that Sean Combs was trying to organize this PR thing and was trying to put on a good show in terms of, hey, listen, mea culpa, I didn't mean going to rehab and all these things that are good for his case. They got, I think, frustrated that the perception was starting to sway a little bit. And then that Cassie tape came out and perception kind of went down the toilet, because once you see it on video, it's very difficult to then you see all your friends kind of abandon you. So, it just frustrates me when you got a guy that is willing to do all these things and you still, don't want to agree to a bond.
So I know we've been keeping you guys for a while. We're going to take a break. Before we do, I want to get some final thoughts, but I want to give you some updates from court. And Brian, I'll start with you on this. The judge just said, I suggest both parties put in letters by Monday at noon about what type of communications Mr. Combs may engage in. Monday at noon. So that's interesting to think about. What is he mean? He's going to be out or he's not going to be out? But his lawyer, Combs' lawyer, Tony Rico, said, we have to email for a week to get him a file folder. Then he said his adult children are willing to obey. He's not a lawless person. We spent hours at the MDC. Mr. Combs was writing down what I said. He's not out of control. DOJ is responsible for the MDC. Those phone calls from me all the time, and I hang up. Just your thoughts on what we're hearing here.
I go back to it. I think this judge is really giving serious consideration to allowing him out and trying to figure out a way to do so where the government's concerns are alleviated, to stop communications, to prevent the wrong kind of communications. A lot of the listeners that have asked questions are seeing, justice play out here, and what a difference a judge makes. There are a lot of, I just listened to Bradford's arguments, all bro, that would listen to it and say, thank you very much, have a seat, denied. This is one of those judges that listens. This is one of those judges that balances. And what a difference a judge makes. And he could very well, if not today, Monday, make a decision that's favorable to Mr. Combs.
So, speaking of which, we have another update. Mr. Rico, again, his attorney says he has access to cell phones in the MDC, but not under our conditions. He fights, he kicks, he makes phone calls. This can be addressed. Thank you. Judge says we're going to get a decision out prompt next week. Bradford.
Yeah, I think that's a smart thing to do. Listen, smart judges don't just make decisions off cuff, right? They go back to their chambers, they think about it. They have very, very smart clerks that know the law, that give them case law to back up their reasoning. And judges sometimes have gut feelings when they've been on the bench for a long time, and lawyers too. We've been doing this for a long time, and you have a gut feeling what's right in a case that tells you that you're right. So I think that it's smart. I think that smart judges put out smart orders because they know they may be appealed, or they know it's going to be publicly read. And that's just what they do. So I'm not shocked that he didn't make a ruling from the bench. Just as Brian said very early on, he wouldn't be surprised either that the judge is going to take some time and do a written order, because that's what good judges do. Good judges do written orders. They don't shoot from the hip, and they don't automatically say one thing or the other. They think about it. They sleep on it. And I don't know how many times I've been in a case where I'm feeling like, oh man, this judge I feel like they're ruling against me. And they say, hey, listen, I'm going to get a written order out, by the end of the week. And then they go back, they read the case law again, they find new case law, they find, all kinds of different things, and then they rule in my favor maybe for a completely different reason than was even discussed at that hearing. But that's what really differentiates great judges from just guys that are, that have been on the bench for maybe 30 or 40 years, and they're kind of going through the motions, and they know what to deny and what to grant and why to deny it, and they just kind of, they're on autopilot. Like I said, when you get a judge that is fairly new, it's refreshing their take on certain issues.
I agree. This is a judge that's very refreshing. I think he's really carefully considering both arguments. As you said, right now the latest update is that he wants those letters Monday. We'll make a decision next week. This could possibly be Sean Combs' last weekend behind bars. We will see. But the court has been adjourned. Gentlemen, let me tell you, Brian McMonagle, Bradford Cohen, thank you so much for your brilliant insight, your analysis, your generosity with your time. And let me just give you one last suggestion. Imagine you two teaming up. My gosh, what a power team you two would be together. So let me just leave you guys with that.
I'm calling him now.
Yeah, you guys really should. My gosh, it's two brilliant minds.
I've long admired Brian's work. And, it's always great to be on with individuals that have been in the trenches, that have actually tried cases, that have been doing this for a long time, because
Okay, so basically they're putting it off until Monday. There's no decision. Oh, I agree to the C. I have a feeling he's going to get out. Yep. There will be no decision until Monday. So I guess we'll be back here Monday. We also have the Steins case. I believe Squid is going to be covering Monday as well. Yeah, I'm still on the channel. I'm just not sharing the screen at the moment. I can reshare the screen. I unshared so I could fast forward it to the current. I don't think for a second that he will stay off of social media. He will manipulate someone into letting them use their phones or tablet or whatever. Because he's a piece of shit like that. I have a question. We all know he's rich, but when they arrested him, didn't they freeze his accounts? I would keep his accounts frozen while he's on bail. I would strap one of those damn bracelets to his ankle. Oh, dang, Paul. I believe Squid is covering the Stein case. If not, I'll cover it for her. If she wants me to. The Stein case is where the sheriff shot the judge over his child. So, let me... Oh, I know. It's ridiculous. I don't get how someone as disgusting as Diddy could be released on bail. Hi, Palmer. Welcome back. I pray that the judge decides not to let him out, but I have this sneaky suspicion that he's going to get bail. Oh, Paul, you know they will. It's a federal case. He got caught doing the crap he done in jail. I don't get how that judge could give him bail. Not only with what his charges are, but the stupid stuff he done in jail. In the shoe at that. It blows my mind what Holly Weird can get away with. I agree, Lulu. I agree 100%. I don't get it. I mean, I know we're allowed to keep filing as many times as possible, but you would think 3 strikes you're out. Like, bro, I don't see how they could let him see the light of day. I don't. I'm mind boggled. Exactly, Paul. Exactly. And we all know what he done to Tupac. We all know what he done to Biggie. We all know what he's done. He's just not being charged for it. Like, all of America has already said he's guilty, though. Jury or not. He's a sicko. So are his little friends that went to his parties. I pray that they protect the witnesses. Because if not, exactly, Paul. I hate to make this political, but the left made fun of so many of us for saying drain the swamp without understanding what we meant by drain the swamp. Sickos like this is what we mean by drain the swamp. There's too many politicians and musicians and actors and actresses and very rich people involved in this stuff with the kids and the women. Some of y'all might not agree with this since Gail brought up OJ, but in my eyes, anything that type, murder, grape, essay, it's all horrible. But for a monster to traffic children and to harm children are worse monsters than a murderer. Exactly, Tim. R. Kelly gave himself up. I don't think everybody was in his pocket. I think he was in other people's pockets. You know, Obama's on the list. The Diddy party list. The Clintons are on the list. They're also on the Epstein list. I'm really curious how many on him and our secret witnesses for him to be the one to catch it all to try and keep them from going in. I never truly believed OJ did it. But we all have our own opinions. There's many. I truly believe there's several presidents on the list, past and present. I believe Biden was on the Epstein list too, if I remember correctly. I wonder if Kamala was involved. I know she was at Diddy parties. I don't know if she was involved with the Epstein part.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to our special live coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs case. I'm Jesse Weber. Thank you so much for joining us and also for being so patient with us as we came back. So for the past 2 hours, we have been covering for you in real time about what has been happening in that federal courtroom.
Hold on, guys.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to our special live coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs case. I'm Jesse Weber. Thank you so much for joining us and also for being so patient with us as we came back. So for the past 2 hours, we have been covering for you in real time about what has been happening in that federal courtroom. It was the issue of bail, now being heard by Judge Arun Subramanian. This is the first time this judge has heard this issue after Sean Combs has been denied bail on 2 separate occasions. And it seems, based on the arguments put forward by the defense and also put by the prosecution, that he may be open to bail for Sean Combs. Now, clearly, as he said, this wouldn't be a situation where he'd be at home confinement in Miami, but it would have to be in New York. The defense talking about how strict these conditions would be, even said they're more stringent than what you see at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, where Sean Combs is currently housed. You heard objections from the prosecution saying that he had been reaching out to witnesses and victims, that he had been engaging in obstruction, that he is a violent individual, that he is a danger to society. The judge heard both arguments and said he will make a decision early next week. The question becomes, will Sean Combs be home for Thanksgiving? That could be a realistic possibility here. And he also said that he wants letters from both sides on Monday about what Sean Combs is allowed to communicate and what he is not allowed to communicate with. Because the big issue was, is he allowed to present social media posts about his family, his life? There was a back and forth about whether or not he can, talk about, reverse the narrative for himself, or whether or not that is trying to improperly influence a potential jury pool. So you heard a lot of back and forth. Big theme was whether or not he should be allowed out, considering Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, who was also charged with sex trafficking and arrested recently, he was let out on a $10 million bail package. Sean Combs was proposing a $50 million bail package, private 24/7 security. At least 3 security guard members would be watching him. No internet use, no phone use, limited to his conversations with his attorneys, only a limited amount of visitors. So the judge is taking all of this under advisement, which seems to be a wise decision. And by all accounts, we'll have a decision about Sean Combs' bail next week. Now, I want to bring in Elizabeth Milner from Law and Crime, our very own. She was in that courtroom for the hearing. She's outside of that federal courthouse right now. Elizabeth, good to see you. What did you see? What were your observations inside there?
Yeah, Jesse, a lot of interest in today's hearing for sure, especially with the whole debate on whether or not Sean Diddy Combs could actually go home or at least be at home in time for Thanksgiving. I will say that I arrived to the courthouse around like 12:15 today. Not a lot of people out, so I thought we actually came here a lot early. So when I went inside the courthouse, I was actually surprised to see the amount of reporters that were already in line waiting to go inside that hearing. Now, I got inside the courthouse probably about 45 minutes before the hearing started, and probably at least 15 other journalists and lawyers were ahead of me in the line. So I was actually very lucky to get a seat today. Now, they actually moved the courtroom to a different location than it was on Tuesday's hearing. Again, that was an emergency hearing, but for this scheduled hearing that's been on the calendar for about a few weeks now, they had it actually at the top floor, so a lot more people were able to get inside that courtroom. And let me tell you, a lot of people were inside that courtroom in that hearing, even members of the public as well too. I feel like I saw some teenagers kind of wanting to know as well too what was going on inside that hearing, because I think they also probably wanted to get a glimpse of Diddy as well too. But let me just kind of paint a picture to our viewers about what you kind of see when you walk inside that federal courtroom. So of course when you first walk in, you're going to see the gallery. You're going to have a left-hand side or right-hand side. The left-hand side is for some of the defense attorneys as well as members of Combs' family, other public interest, and on the other side it's going to be some extra attorneys from the government side as well as all of the reporters. And we were really kind of body to body inside that courtroom. Then when you kind of go outside of the gallery, then you have the defense table, then you have the prosecution's table, and then you have the judge obviously on the bench. So it's a little different from how when we normally cover trials. You have the defense on one side, you have the prosecution on another side. So a lot of us on the reporter side, we were kind of anxious to see if Diddy's kids were going to be at the hearing today, and they did. They arrived, they were in unison, they all came in holding hands together too, and Sean Combs' mother Janice was also in that courtroom too. But another person who I found particularly interesting to be inside that courtroom was LaWanda Lane. Now, she is the best friend of Kim Porter, and as we have been reporting on, she has been taking care of Sean Combs' twin daughters Delilah and Jessie while Combs has been locked up inside that federal detention center. But whenever they came in, it was kind of different from when all of the family had to come in during that October hearing and that it went silent. That wasn't necessarily the case. A lot of people were kind of whispering and talking a little bit back and forth and inside the gallery. Then they all came in. Again, they were all holding hands. They all sat down beside each other. And then, of course, court proceeded and everything like that. I was expecting some moments of like maybe some tearing up because remember, and I'm sure you've already told our viewers this, when they were kind of discussing the freak-offs, the assault video that was released by CNN earlier this year, as well as just some of Diddy's conduct or alleged conduct, I should say. You know, I can imagine just being 17 years old, I'm specifically talking about Jesse and Delilah Combs because they are still underage here, that it can be hard to listen to your father's alleged conduct and just hearing just kind of the inner details of what all is going on. Obviously, it's been making the news everywhere. It's not really a secret, but at the same time, to be inside a courtroom for 2 hours and kind of listening to your father's conduct, I can imagine to be hard. But from my side and from what I saw, I didn't see much of an emotional reaction or anything like that as far as it coming from Diddy's children. And so they pretty much kind of stayed forward, kind of kept their eyes on what the judge was saying, what the defense was saying, obviously what the government was saying when they were making their arguments. So I didn't see any type of actual emotion whenever they were making their arguments. But again, I can only imagine what may have been going on in their head as well too. But it's also significant that they were in the courtroom because, as I mentioned on Tuesday, they weren't here on Tuesday, and it was probably likely because
signing up for TSA PreCheck is very easy. For a long time, I thought it was going to be difficult, which kind of kept me from getting.
Miami can be a lot to do in the matter of just getting 24 or 12-hour notice. And so, you know, it wasn't very surprising that they were all inside the courtroom. But again, it's significant, too, because the government alleges that they are all doing this as kind of like a PR stunt and kind of in a way to sway the jury into making them seem like a unified family. I mean, we've seen this before in trials, and I want to kind of make a clear distinction on the comparison I'm about to make here. I mean, we've seen this before in trials, and I'm talking specifically about the Alec Murdaugh trial, where, you know, Alec Murdaugh's family came inside that courtroom as well, too. So it wasn't very surprising that he had his family there to kind of back him up. But I will say, just like on Tuesday, whenever Diddy did come into the courtroom and how he beamed and how he looked at every single person in the gallery, it wasn't like that this time. So when he came inside, it was still in that khaki jumpsuit. He, again, looks kind of grayish, a little bit like that, a little thin. But at the same time, you know, being in jail or a federal detention center for the past 2 months, obviously that's going to kind of wear and tear on anybody, including somebody like Sean Diddy Combs. But as soon as he came inside that courtroom today, he beamed up immediately, looking straight at his family. And that was pretty much the only people he kept eye contact with outside of his attorneys. So he looked immediately at his family. He blew kisses to them all, kind of like a little like, I love you, mouthing of the words type of thing. And even before the judge got on the bench, he turned to them once again, too, to kind of just mouth a little like, you know, like it felt like he was just happy to see them, I should say. And then, of course, when he sat, before he sat at the defense table, he hugged every single one of his attorneys. But again, like I said Tuesday, you know, Diddy knows that a lot of eyes are on him at this time. So there's not going to be a moment where we don't see what we expect to see of Sean Diddy Combs, if that makes sense. We're going to see somebody who's not going to appear defeated. We're going to see somebody who is going to appear with smiles. So that way, I think he's also kind of signaling to the world that he's okay in a way, but at the same time, maybe reassuring his family, especially his daughters, who, again, the twins, Jesse and Delilah, are just 17. Chance just turned 18. But with the exception of his youngest daughter, who is 2-year-old baby Love, who is probably with her mom over in California, I would assume, but I just don't want to speculate there. But of course, when when there wasn't a decision made, everyone was kind of ushered and rushed out of the courtroom. So I didn't get that last glance of maybe a last blown kiss to his family or to his mother or anything like that. But at the same time, you know, excuse me, that's pretty much what we can expect from Sean Combs.
Let me ask you this, Elizabeth, and that was a great recap of what you're our eyes and ears. We don't have cameras in that courtroom. Unfortunately, we're not going to have cameras in that courtroom. So you are our best eyes and ears about what is happening there. I broke down the legal arguments and what was said between the prosecution and the defense and Judge Subramanian. From Judge Subramanian, though, his demeanor, the way he was asking these questions to the prosecution, did it seem to you like he was skeptical of the prosecution's arguments? Did it seem like he was pushing them a little bit more? The reason we're asking is, Does he seem open to Sean Combs getting bail? I know he's reserved judgment, but there's one thing to report on what he was said. There's another thing, you got a glimpse of the way he was asking the questions. What's your take on that?
I think it kind of stems back to, with this case, you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's. I think he was asking both sides very important questions. When he was specifically talking to the government, I think he was trying to also make it clear, it did feel like he was open to it. To answer your question, it did feel that way. I was actually kind of surprised by that aspect as well, too, because, going in, and I shouldn't have made that assumption in the first place. I was like, no way could this ever happen. But at the end of these arguments, I'm like, maybe it's possible that this could actually happen. I think it was kind of interesting with that moment where, Mark Agnifilo mentioned his home in Miami, and Judge Submaranian was like, oh, okay, absolutely not. And then they suggested that apartment on the Upper East Side. But as far as the government's kind of arguments that they were making, it seemed like the judge really just kind of wanted to press to make sure that they were crossing all their T's and dotting all of their I's. And I kind of have to give him credit a little bit here, because I think sometimes in the court cases that we do cover, we see that a judge can side with one particular side as opposed to the other. But I feel like for both sides, he was kind of playing it fair on both ends, kind of making sure that he was that both sides were explaining everything that he needed to know before he makes his final decision next week.
And we will see what that decision will be. Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for going in there. Thank you so much for reporting to us. And I know it's a rainy, cold day in New York, so really appreciate you taking the time. Elizabeth Milner, everybody, thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I guess we will reconvene on this case next week. I need to edit. I've been promising y'all a video all week. Exactly, Gil. He thinks because he's got money, he can get away with it. I hate to break it to him, but that ain't the case. So I'm gonna get little man down for a nap because he's losing it and he's getting clingy. And once I get him down, I'm gonna work on editing, since I've been promising y'all a video all week, but I have felt miserable. I love you guys. Remember, you're one of a kind, and never let anyone dim your light.